When I first started PC gaming back in 2011, one of the first games that got recommended to me was The Witcher. The second game had just come out to very positive reviews, but my PC actually couldn't run it. So I bought the first game instead, and well, I absolutely loved it. Yeah, it was clunky, I definitely remember that, especially the combat. But the story was incredible, and it really got me excited for the second game. Eventually I rebuilt my PC, and the very first game that I played on it was The Witcher 2. It only deepened my love for the series and made me into a huge fan. I've actually been avoiding The Witcher for a while on my channel simply because there are so many other dissection videos out there. So many really well-researched and incredibly well-done chunks of content which I'm honestly unsure I could stack up against. The love for this series is staggering at times, and I'm not entirely sure that I can bring anything fresh to the table with a video on it. But after debating it for a while, I decided to go through with it. So I'll be covering the first game today, looking at its mechanics, what it did well, and what needed improvement. Before I jump in, I'll point out that there's going to be an Audible ad about halfway through this thing. Additionally, I have some more limited time shirts that will be around for a good 2 weeks or so after this video drops. Plus, if you have any interest in the series after part or all of this video, GOG hooked me up with an 80% off discount for the Witcher 3 Game of the Year edition for those who want to grab the latest entry and give it a spin. Otherwise, this game's just like free, I think, on GOG almost always, so. And finally, I stream on Twitch every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday if you want to catch me in between videos. Alright, let's tear into this thing. We begin with a 7-minute Final Fantasy cutscene regaling the tale that gave birth to the legend of our main guy, Geralt of Rivia. This cutscene sets up a lot of stuff. The existence of these little potions and tinctures which grant powers to Geralt, which I'll get to in a bit. The idea of otherworldly monsters which exist in a medieval kind of world. The very premise of a Witcher, which is primarily hired to take care of monsters in various ways. A showcase of the various tools and methods that Geralt uses to deal with his prey. But most importantly, that our guy can straight up cold cock a Striga in the mouth if need be, just to stop its momentum and cause it to fall. Geralt is a badass, and this opening scene makes that perfectly abundant. Now I'll mention something here that's really going to separate this video from other lore type videos, I think. I remember quite a bit about the various factions in these games. Redania, the Scoia'tael, Skellige, Nilfgaard, Novigrad. This series has an overwhelming abundance of lore and background. And if you're really looking for a video that kinda tears into the meat of what makes these factions tick, and how they were formed and what they stand for, there are gonna be some good ones out there. But I'm just gonna be playing through this game and talking about what I encounter, and maybe throwing in any background knowledge that I think might be important for this particular game. I'm not going to tell you what King Radovid's favorite food is, or to really dig deep into the various political backgrounds of these characters. I'll give it a brief 1-2 and try to keep most of you on board, especially the ones that have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. Alright, so we begin with a brief overview about the current setting, outlining a great war which raged across the area that the game takes place in, known as the Northern Realms. Well, it's been 5 years and many monsters have been attracted to the stench of war which had seeped into the land. Typically, this is where the Witchers would come into play, but they've been uncharacteristically absent throughout the aftermath of these northern wars. We cut to Geralt, who's obviously wounded, before he collapses and is picked up by his Witcher comrades before being taken to Kaer Morhen. This is a beat-to-shit keep where Witchers train under the School of the Wolf. After Geralt makes his speedy recovery, it's revealed that he has a heavy case of amnesia, which is a trope that I'm not extraordinarily fond of in video games. Don't get me wrong, it definitely helps someone new to the series learn the ropes which an experienced protagonist should already know. But it always seems so easy to me, and the missing pieces have to really shine to make the amnesiac storyline worth it. So we're talking to Triss, another important character, when the keep gets invaded. These oafs have been promised a wad of cash for every dead Witcher, or every dead freak as one of them puts it. This is a particularly interesting point to note, as before this it seemed that humans tended to rely on and appreciate Witchers for their services. However, the way that these invaders insult Witchers with disdain shows the other side of the coin. Okay, yeah, this is definitely part of the game that I knew I was going to be unhappy with. Welcome to whatever CDPR decided was a passable movement and combat system back in 2007. Piloting Geralt isn't as bad as I remembered that it would be, but I was also expecting the worst. The issue is that the A and D keys don't let you run left and right. Instead, you run forward and then decide that you want to move left or right, and watch as Geralt putters slowly at a pace that really can't even be called walking. It's like his amnesia affected his basic motor skills. In combat, this is a bit more frustrating, as I never really feel fully in control of Geralt. When I dodge, I'm not sure where I'm gonna end up, and most of the time I look like I'm trying to challenge every enemy to a Yakuza-style disco dance-off instead of fighting them normally. As far as the actual combat goes, I kind of just click enemies. It's like me playing a sniper in any FPS, except I'm not clicking on their heads. So yeah, it's exactly like me playing a sniper in an FPS. The difference is that there's a kind of rhythm built into the combat that I'm sure I'll get a tutorial about later. Basically, whenever my sword turns fiery, I can click again for another faster combo attack, which is kind of cool in its own way. As bad as I was ready for this to be, I kind of like the light rhythm clicker combat. It keeps me engaged in a way that similar auto combat systems don't. After we're done clobbering these meatheads, I pause the game for the inevitable modding section. Now, the game doesn't look horrible for 2007. I mean, not great, but definitely not bad. But The Witcher has a fuckload of mod content. And god, am I tempted to pick up stuff like speed increases, better inventory and combat, dialogue boxes, and other little random fixes. But I'm gonna stick with the title of the video and just upgrade the graphics as usual. Because honestly, I don't want to look at Potato Geralt the entire game. I'll have a list of mods that I use in the description of the video. Now that that's over with, I'll note another odd choice about this game. As if the devs weren't quite satisfied with their living monument to third-person action games, they included another curious option which gives the game an isometric Diablo kind of feel to it. I have zero idea how to feel about this. Like, you can click where you want to be and play the game as normal, and I don't know what to do with myself. Because I like a good isometric ARPG. Grim Dawn, Path of Exile, the aforementioned Diablo. But if there was a camera feature in these games which turned the camera dead on the back of the player character and presented the world that way instead, yeah, I'd feel pretty overwhelmed with that too. So we continue on through the tutorial after this load shows up with this smaller load controlling it. The big monster is referred to as a Frightener, which is, a bit uninspired. Still, it apparently hates loud noises, so Geralt is tasked with getting the gate open which these guys close so that the Witcher squad can go ring a bell to frighten the Frightener. This takes us to the part of the tutorial where we learn about the fiery sword combo system, in addition to learning how to switch sword styles. We've got the wolf style, which is for stronger enemies, and the cat style, which is for faster enemies. This adds another layer to combat which I actually surprisingly enjoy. Well, after we clear the baddies out, Triss collapses the gate to halt the Frightener temporarily and then screams at Old Man Vesemir for hiding mutagens in the laboratory here, which the leader of this excursion is seemingly after. Mutagens are powerful substances that Witchers use to enhance their abilities. They're like what the vitamin shop sells in real life, except they work. The way that they're used and explained are very different from game to game, and as such aren't gone into detail yet at this stage of the first game. Now you would think that these things are a consistently reoccurring ingredient to create these potions which Geralt slurped down in the introduction, but they aren't in this game. Instead, common potions are usually made with various monster parts, herbs, and minerals. Even the upgraded so-called mutagenic potions don't explicitly take mutagens to create them, and instead tend to use very powerful boss monster ingredients in addition to the normal stuff. The main difference between the normal potions and the mutagenic potions is in their permanence. Where a normal potion might grant you dark vision or max vitality or resistance to poison for a few hours, a mutagenic potion permanently upgrades your stats and talents. The problem with the normal potions is that they have a secondary effect which hinders someone from consuming them too much, known as toxicity. Basically, if someone slams multiple high toxicity level potions back to back without detoxing their body in between, then they begin suffering adverse effects. In Geralt's case, first his vitality decreases. Then he's unable to run. And finally he dies if the green bar at the top left hits its max point. This is kind of a cool system in terms of balance. Whereas Elder Scrolls games tend to outright limit the amount of potions that you could have at a certain time, this toxicity system kind of does that same thing, but better. So after chugging a Thunderbolt potion, we press further into Kaer Morhen while learning how to use the group style of combat, which is good for hitting multiple enemies. I gotta say, I'm actually really enjoying the theatrics of the combat despite the controls being less than perfect in my eyes. Geralt flows between enemies, jumps over them, and dodges more or less at your command, and it looks pretty damn cool. I'm escorted by Leo, who seems to be an apprentice at the School of the Wolf. This is only echoed when he seems to take on a guy in front of us, only to divert his attention away when I decide to pick up the guy that's behind us. This results in me getting hit in the back because he left his guy alone. Thanks a lot, asshole. Although this is probably just poor AI programming and less about the guy being a novice. So we make it to the lab only for the way to be cut off forcibly by a magic barrier. Leo exclaims that we need to go get Triss to clear the way. I haven't quite delved into Triss's background yet, but the important thing for us to know now is that she's a powerful sorceress who can clear the barrier. The problem is that we're cut off in nearly every direction, and Leo tells Geralt to simply magic away the rubble to get to Triss. Geralt's amnesia kicks in for another rousing round of game design, as he has no idea what the hell Leo is talking about. Fortunately, a very convenient path to something called the Circle of Elements is still open, and we travel there to learn the Ard spell for our troubles. So yeah, there are quite a few spell signs throughout the game which exist for usage by Geralt and others. I'll cover them now just for the sake of tidiness. Ard is a force of telekinetic energy which is used to blast people and objects alike. So force push, basically. Igni is like a fire Ard, except with less push and more fire damage. Axii breaks from the force push formula, and is used as a charm spell in combat. Those who aren't immune to it instead fight alongside you when you successfully hex them. From my experience, it generally only tends to work on non-monster enemies, but it's also something that I really don't care about casting pretty much ever. Quen is definitely one of the more curious signs, as it's used purely as protection to buy time. I don't mean that a shield is cast and then you can continue to fight with a barrier. I mean that as soon as you take a hostile action, the barrier is broken. Basically, you use it defensively to chug potions, or switch weapons, or just to close the gap between ranged enemies. And finally, we have Yrden, which sounds like you're drunk when you're saying it. It can be thought more as a magical trap rather than a strictly offensive strike or defensive barrier. When placed on the ground, Yrden just creates spikes. Like the enemy might get blasted back or they might just take some damage, but that's really all it does. I don't use it. At any rate, we art our way out of our stony prison before making it back topside to the crew. Triss and Vesemir take turns calling each other children.
You're all children.
Triss, child.
Before I get the option to either take on the Frightener with Vesemir or to accompany Triss down to the lab. This is, It's actually a relatively tough decision if you know the outcome of each. Without knowing the outcome, I'd choose to run down to the labs every time to help Triss take on the mage and his crew. The reward is a sapphire, which is good for early game money if you want to sell it. But if I take on the Frightener with Vesemir and the boys, my reward is a chunk of red meteorite ore, which is used to forge one of the best swords for the early to mid game. Additionally, there's a cutscene which is affected later on by this decision that we'll get to. But I know for a fact that I helped Triss the first time that I played this game, so I'll help out Big Vest this time around. So the Frightener fight really isn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Basically, it's invincible until you ard 2 cauldrons and ring a bell. Then you and the other Witchers start hacking away. It takes 2 rounds of this for the thing to fall before Triss comes stumbling in from a portal. She's taken some damage and claims that she underestimated her foe before falling to the ground. This is normally where I'd make a, and then she died kind of joke. But she actually looks like she does this time. I mean, she doesn't, but Jesus.
I underestimated him. Hurry.
So Leo and Geralt run down to the lab before walking leisurely after they arrive there. I'm going to affectionately refer to the two who are raiding the lab as Big Man and Glasses. So Big Man grabs the Witcher box of magic secrets and Fortnite dances into the portal before Glasses raises his crossbow at Geralt and Leo. He starts spouting off some myth about Witchers being able to parry a bolt mid-flight before he 360 no-scopes Leo when he was trying to flank him slowly. This is usually the part where an experienced fighter would rush the target who just turned and shot his partner, but Geralt does the whole, "Oh my god, Leo, no!" thing, before Glasses gleefully prances through the portal as well. Geralt's response is to throw his sword. So yeah, Leo actually does die when Vesemir comes down and realizes that Big Man took all of the healing cheese wheels with him through the portal. It's actually kind of funny because I was asking my wife to identify each of the characters here to make sure that I didn't mix up like, Lambert and Eskel. And I asked her which one Leo was since his name kept coming up, and she turned into the human version of Google correcting a search result. Did you mean Letho? Nah, I don't know who Leo is. Yeah, I guess this would be the reason why, huh? After this, we learn how to meditate, which serves as both a time skip function and as a way to heal and reduce potion toxicity buildup. It also serves as a state to brew potions, which you're shortly directed to do in order to heal Triss. To do this, Geralt has to snag some ingredients while picking off stragglers from the raid. I was actually going to note something about the combat here before I made it back down to the other Witchers, in that every time Geralt goes in for an attack, the enemies halt their own attacks to try to weakly defend from Geralt's vicious blows. There's never any trading of blows or points where an enemy attacks anyways despite Geralt being open. I thought this was a pretty weird combat quirk, but it's actually explained pretty well by Eskel when I make it back down. You see, aspiring Witchers undergo something known as the Trial of the Grasses. And while I won't go into a ton of specifics, I will say that this trial is how Geralt's hair turned stark white. The trial's magical properties are what give a Witcher his lightning-fast reflexes, natural health regeneration, ability to see better in the dark, and resistance to poison. Not many make it through the trial, but the ones that do are basically superhuman in their strength and speed. It explains the idea of Geralt overwhelming normal human thugs with no issue. Of course, all of this comes at a cost even when someone does make it through the trial, and that cost is infertility. Now, if you know anything about The Witcher as a series, you'll know that sex is basically a cornerstone of it. If you counted the amount of nuts busted over the course of The Witcher, you'd be able to feed a city of squirrels with it. So obviously the sex drive is still there regardless of this premise of infertility. Additionally, Eskel explains that if Triss had acquired access to the Witcher laboratory here, she would have insisted on using its boons to heal the sick and help people. Which makes it sound like the Witchers are knowledge-hoarding dickheads like the Brotherhood of Steel, who only look out for their own kind. But then Eskel elaborates that oftentimes good people see the good which certain resources can impart, without thinking about the ways which bad people can use those same resources. Not that this Brotherhood-esque philosophy did any good, seeing as the place just got raided by a group belonging to said bad people.
Eskel, I have amnesia.
Talking to Vesemir yields a little more information about a previous attack on Kaer Morhen a while back. He explains that a good amount of Witchers trained here with their apprentices before a lot of propaganda filled with lies was spread among the general human population. Flyers were posted around cities warning people about the evil that Witchers spread. This was that aforementioned other side of the coin where a good chunk of society regards the Witcher population as freaks of nature dabbling in dark arts. The result of this misinformation caused a gigantic mob of humans led by sorcerers to assemble around Kaer Morhen before they slaughtered every single Witcher inside save for Vesemir. It's a dark chapter of history which only forewarns of the way which Geralt may or may not be treated along his journey. Alright, so we brew the potion, bring it up to Triss, and she's instantly horny. Like I said, The Witcher and fucking is like leaves on a tree. It's kinda weird as hell that Triss stays in the same position while she's talking to you though, but I guess it's just a product of the time that the game was made. Also, the voice acting is,
What I felt when I learned you were alive, hard to compare to anything.
Oh.
Except maybe what I feel as I look at you.
Ugh. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Geralt's gritty, gravelly voice and Triss's confident demeanor and inflection, but some of these dialogue lines are not very well, executed. So yeah, we don't get the 4K definition, ass-grabbing, tit-fondling, Gatorade-chugging display of well-coached perfect stroke fucking like we do in The Witcher 3. We get this hentai game-adjacent collectible card where Triss's tits have expanded 2 cup sizes and are tastefully censored. Yeah, this video's definitely gonna be marked 18+ by advertisers. Oh well. So we send off Leo in a Viking funeral before the rest of the group decides to split up to chase down clues leading to the attackers. Geralt heads south to the capital of the country of Temeria called Vizima. This is followed up by a cutscene in which a boy and a woman are walking towards an encampment near the edge of Vizima before a group of Barghest give chase. Barghest are these sickly, green energy-laden hounds which are led by an alpha hellhound known as the Beast. Not much is known by the villagers here as to why or how they appeared, but what is known is that both of these entities are pretty good in overwhelming hunger decks. So Geralt happens to be at the gates here, and he proceeds to take out the group of Barghest before the beast possesses the child into saying this.
The world will perish amidst ice and be reborn with a new sun! Reborn of elder blood, of hen Kaer, of a planted seed, a seed that will not sprout but burst into flames.
Yeah, you remember the whole, I'm not gonna go into crazy detail about some of this stuff thing? This would be one of those moments. I just really dislike these points in games where a demon or a dark mage or whatever decides to blab just nonsense at the player, even if it does make sense at some point down the line. If I were a new player to the series who did no reading beforehand, I'd have no context or basis for anything that this kid just yelled. Hardly any of these words would make sense to me, and my mind naturally just shuts off when this much stuff is thrown at me at once. Now Shani does step in to state that the kid just rattled off some elven prophecy, which does soften the blow a bit, but I just have a strong disdain for this type of storytelling, I guess. It might just be a personal preference. Oh, by the way, this is Shani. She's a healer medic type who's trying her best to get into the city of Vizima to help heal people there, but we'll get to that in a moment. For now, she imparts the wisdom that the Reverend here may know something about the men who attacked us in addition to having a job to take out the beast. Before I move on to the Reverend, I get a chance to distribute some talents. The skill tree in this game looks a bit intimidating at first glance, but it's really pretty straightforward. You've got your bronze, silver, and gold talents. Each are allocated in different parts of a particular tree, and ascend in how powerful each talent can be. From here you have your various skill sets. You have the 5 magic signs, the different combat schools for either steel or silver weapons, and the base stats of strength, dex, stamina, and intelligence. I decided to spread the 9 points that I had pretty evenly across the general damage and vitality boosts in strength, dex, and stam, in addition to dropping a few points in strong and fast steel fighting. My last point went into art as the skill is a powerhouse early on. I'll ignore intelligence because that's for nerds. From here the game is pretty much open. You can grab some contracts from the bounty board which has you tracking down various monsters, trade for different supplies while meeting people going about their lives, and chat up some local fistfighters if you want to brawl.
Your mother sucks dwarf cock.
We beat each other for coin.
Interesting.
Fat Fred will rearrange your face, just show me your gold.
So I decide to start exploring around before figuring that if I'm going to do that, I might as well chat up the Reverend for the info that Shani told me about earlier.
Begone, devil's breed.
Well, that's not a good start. Yeah, the Rev is one of those folk who believe that witchers are blasphemous assholes, though he does have a better reason for it than the usual propaganda. There's a witcher who seems to be a coward named Berengar, who's been mentioned before this by Vesemir. Well, Berengar came through here and offered his services to the Reverend here before fleeing after getting a good look at the beast. So to prove to the holy man that I'm not going to do the same, I'm to light 5 candles along the road to ward monsters away at night. I don't really know how that proves anything, but yeah, okay. Well, Geralt, being the money-minded witcher that he is, tells him that he'll do it for 100 fun bucks, which sounds like a lot for candle lighting. I mean, you can buy a meal for like less than 10 orens, I think. Though I guess this guy really believes that candles will keep monsters away, so maybe it's worth it to him. So I go to a cave filled with these big stupid plant boys to find a guy's dead friend, which brings up a pretty moderate issue with this game in my eyes. So as you might have noticed, this place is dark as fuck. If you're watching on mobile or in direct sunlight, you might not even be able to see much of anything that's on the screen right now besides the UI. Now obviously this is where I would track down some ingredients for a cat potion or locate a torch to make things easier to see. The issue though is that I don't need it. With the way the interface is set up in this game, I really don't need to see anything in certain caves because every enemy has a circular red health bar underneath them. It doesn't matter what I'm supposed to be looking at. I'm just focused on looking for red circles. And of course this becomes a bigger issue when I'm looking for an exit or a hidden crevice or something along those lines. And if that were the case, I'd definitely pop a cat potion and get to searching. But there are some caves and areas where it just isn't worth it beyond the quality of life change that the potion brings. I guess I would have rather just had the whole night vision thing be a toggleable power that has a finite duration until it recharges, and have the cat potion extend that duration or increase its power instead. Thankfully, the concept of thievery doesn't exist in The Witcher, so stealing a torch isn't a problem at least. Let's see, what do we got here? Some orens, chicken, And what do you find people have? Ugh, gross. Anyways. Ooh, a ring. So my plan initially was to get the lay of the land and to complete as many quests during the day as I can. Unfortunately, completing quests during the day, or at least taking care of the main part of them, seems to be a fruitless endeavor, since monsters only tend to come out at night or in dark places like caves during the day. I just thought that I could have at least made some headway on a few of the more isolated ones, such as visiting the crypt for monster slaying. But the quests almost always have some kind of blockage which prevents me from proceeding any further. This crypt over here is locked up, and this guy wants me to bury his friend's remains at the Reverend's crypt under the church, which of course gets nixed by the Reverend until I light his stupid candles at night. At least I get to meet up with Zoltan, who looks like a claymation horror monster in this game. Yeah, dwarves and elves are not treated well by humans, at least not in the northern kingdoms. They generally have less rights, are blamed for any little thing which goes wrong, and are constantly harassed for simply not being human. The mindset explains why witchers are often looked down upon, and it tends to lead to more radical groups such as the Scoia'tael deciding to try to fight for their freedoms, which makes sense. Anyway, Zoltan is an old friend of Geralt's who also thought that he died a while back, mirroring Shani's thoughts. Geralt doesn't fully remember him, of course, but the dwarf insists on getting a beer and trying to clear up some memories, to which Geralt can either decline or outright ignore by asking Zoltan what's on his mind. The dwarf responds by telling him that he's worried about his soon-to-be in-laws who tend to care more about material wealth than he does. So I finally decide that it's time to do some nighttime questing, which is where the game really lets you start making progress. Unfortunately, this progress is marred by some pretty god-awful quest structure. Initially, I start out by taking out some drowners, which isn't an issue at all. I figured from here I would start lighting those candles while completing the Barghest contract along the way. The issue is that after I light 4 out of 5, I stumble upon a scene where a group of men are threatening to rape a woman who works at the inn. So I saw all of them in half before the woman insists that I escort her home. Yay. Well, her home is literally right next to where I lit the very first candle. Double yay. So I take her back to her grandma's home while trying to keep her alive from Barghest attacks, and she decides to reward me with the second main currency of the game, sex. Of course, old Nan would have a heart attack if she woke up to Geralt ramrodding her granddaughter into the tea table, so the woman tells him to meet her up at the old abandoned mill at sundown.
I wouldn't want the miller's ghost disturbing us.
Ghosts wouldn't dare disturb a witcher. Others will stay away out of fear.
But the important thing here is that I just ran across most of the map and back only for the payoff to be another quest step that will take place tomorrow. Now I've got to run all the way back to that 5th candle. And while Geralt doesn't move that slowly across the map, the lack of fast travel is really starting to weigh this game down. You have to understand that I raided nearly this entire map earlier checking houses for a torch and other supplies, in addition to heading to a cave to find a dude's remains and then running all the way back to the Reverend only for him to tell me to piss off until I light his shitty candles. I've done a lot of back and forth navigating already. The last thing I want is more forced back and forth navigating. Well, I guess it's not forced per se. I mean, I did have the option to just let these men rape the inmate, or the option to have her run back home by herself, which, didn't seem right. Additionally, contracts can't just be completed without background knowledge of the creatures that you're hunting. So if I have a ghoul contract, I can't actually complete it until I have a book which details ghouls, or if I spend a bronze talent on monster lore, which is okay design from a world building perspective since it continues to play off Geralt's amnesia, but shitty design when it comes to gameplay, seeing as these books can be found in a variety of random places. For example, the ghoul book in particular is obtained from a random drunkard at the inn, which I very easily could have missed seeing as most of these peasants have nothing to say to Geralt. Well, I do what I can with what I got and knock out a few of these quests before heading back to the inn, where I meet with Zoltan again. I ask him about some dice and he explains that they're used to play dice poker. The game's explanation here is that it's poker with dice. Like, that's it. There's no other tutorial until you manually back out and look through your journal. And you know what your journal tells you? The player with the best poker rank wins. There is no list of poker ranks or anything. The game just expects you to understand. Which is hilarious because if you tell me about a game that's just poker with dice, I pretty much immediately know how to play it. But someone who has no idea how to play poker is just hooped here. So after I tell the Reverend that his stupid candle lighting bullshit didn't work, he trusts me enough to tell me that the group who attacked Kaer Morhen, known as Salamandra, have been terrorizing the local population for a while now. Just mentioning them around the wrong people can get them into deep shit, so the guy wants to be extra sure that he can trust me. To do this, I'm to earn the trust of 3 other well-respected town members, which all have me doing pretty much everything that I just tried doing on my own to some degree. Fuck. So yeah, the whole go out and explore kind of thing really isn't encouraged or rewarded here. Seeing as if I immediately beelined it to the Reverend and then did his quest, he'd had me doing everything that I did on day 1 anyways. This is honestly harrowing. And I think a lot of it would have been so much easier if I could just cross the middle of this map, but I can't. The middle is sectioned off by Geralt's worst nightmare, a fucking 2-foot-high fence. Maybe he just doesn't remember how to hurdle them in his amnesia. The quests themselves have me running through a pitch-black tomb and fighting off ghouls, fighting more drowners along the riverbed, and fighting off some more plant monsters. That last one was a bit funny though, as I had to drink a shitload of alcohol to get this guy to trust me, and then Geralt decides to fight them while drunk. I mean, overall, I'm not having a bad time, but my time could definitely be a lot better. Oh, and also the Reverend wants me to take care of the beast to fully trust me, which has me talking to the witch Abigail here in town. Unfortunately, she wants me to gather some herbs, which means I'm going to have to sink 3 points into intelligence and buy a 200 orn book just to know how to pick them. I think I may have been able to purchase the herbs off of someone, but fuck it. You win today, CDPR. So I run back to tell this goofy peasant guard that I killed his ghouls, and we get ambushed by some Salamandra agents who have a mutated dog with them. This is the scene that was affected by my initial choice to go help take down the Frightener, as my lack of presence with Triss made it so that these guys made off with way more alchemical stuff from the lab to experiment with. The game very thoroughly beats the player over the head with this information. You start by getting a cutscene where Geralt details his choice to fight the Frightener. Then Geralt goes, "If only I had gone with Triss, then none of this would have happened." And then the guy we're talking to goes, "What are you talking about?" And Geralt goes, "Why yes, I made a choice in the prologue of this video game known as The Witcher. Had I made the other choice, this cutscene would have been different." Good God, I get it, dude. So I'm about done with chapter 1 here as I tidy up a last couple of quests which include me slaying some trophy monsters and forging my red meteorite sword. Oh, and meeting with the waitress from before.
Ladies first.
Perhaps I shouldn't. What if my new frock gets dirty?
Don't worry. We Witchers have solutions for that.
Something haunts the old mill again.
Seems so. Maybe we need a Witcher to look into it.
Ah, they're never around when you need them. They'll have to wait. Any monster here today will stay until tomorrow. Certainly no sense in sending anyone else.
You remember when I was like, oh, the humans in this game can't compete with the Witcher's speed, so it makes sense that they can't strike back. Well, this shit oftentimes applies to monsters too, which makes me think that it was more of a combat issue than an intentional choice. Or maybe it really is intentional, but it feels really weird when I keep backing Azrael up while he does no damage to me. Either way, I give the witch the petals, she makes a potion, and then she gives it to the little boy who got possessed before to help him get possessed again. Then I tell the Reverend that we made a little boy bark like a dog, and he's like, ah, alright. Well, Salamandra meet up at the inn and the innkeeper has the key to their hideout. So I head to the inn only to find the innkeeper dead, and a group of salamanders rearing up to rape Shani. What the fuck is up with this game and rape? So I cut them in half as is tradition, and then find the key to the Salamandra hideout. After I tear through it and the cave that it connects to, I find the boy Alvin down here and start to work my way out. Here I find Abigail, who begins listing off all of the misdeeds which the men of the village have performed to cause all of this to happen. The dopey town guard raped a girl who then poisoned herself. Another guy killed his own brother for money. The Reverend exiled his own daughter when she became pregnant, which sent her into a life of prostitution in Vizima. Geralt points out to Abigail that she knew about all of this and yet said and did nothing, even profiting off of some of it. She has zero defense against this except for the best defense of all, banging Geralt right here in the cave in front of a boy. What the fuck? Geralt, you gotta have some higher standards, man. So you walk outside of the Bone Zone only to find an angry mob has assembled in your absence. Every one of the townsfolk here have decided to blame the witch for their misfortune, claiming that she bewitched them and led the beast here through her witchcraft.
Since the beginning of time, woman has been the nest of all evil, the tool of chaos. party to the conspiracy against the world and the human race. Woman is ruled solely by corporal lust. Begone, Witcher, and leave the witch, or we'll burn you too.
I'd like to see you try, pleb. You have two options. Wait until I leave and then murder Abigail, but then I'll come back. I'll slay every lice-ridden peasant, anything that moves and can't climb a tree. Or you can try to lead honorable lives, clear your conscience, start again, like humans. The choice is yours.
This is the reason that I love this series. Scenes like this give me the strength and urge me to continue on. It's a lot like Mass Effect 1 for me, where the gameplay can really drag on at times, but the payoff is always these types of cutscenes where shit gets real and verbal exchanges are heavy. I absolutely love it. So after we intimidate the mob here, we take out the beast once and for all, only for the Reverend and his cronies to summon the courage to take on Geralt and Abigail. The problem here is that they really give Abigail the business if I don't actively go out of my way to protect her, which really sucks because there's no health bar for her on screen or anything, so I don't know how much health she has left. I wound up having to reload and do all of this again just to ensure her safety, which definitely brings down this shining moment just before this. But that's not all that happens. The second time around when I reload, I hear fighting during the cutscene with the Reverend confronting us. And when it's time to fight, Abigail's already dead. They killed her during the fucking cutscene. Then the dogs kill her. Then the cutscene doesn't even play, the townfolk just rush us and start fighting until the Reverend comes up and locks me into place while Abigail and I take damage. Then that happens again a few more times. What the hell? Well, as it turns out, Abigail just resurrects after the fight's over. It doesn't seem like she should have, because the game had her alive the first time the cutscene played out. Plus, there were multiple times where Geralt got locked into the cutscene while taking damage. So it just seemed like a gigantic bug that I couldn't shake. I mean, I'm sure it still is, but Abigail does survive the fight regardless. What a shit show, my god. What can I say, you compliment this game and it does its best to make sure you misspoke. So we grab Shani from the inn and head to Vizima, leaving the outskirts a much better place than we found it, with trails of dead peasants everywhere you look. Well, the guy who raped the girl who killed herself unsurprisingly sells us down the river, claiming that we forged the entry pass into the city which we pilfered from the corpse of the Reverend. Facing down this absolute load of a human, Geralt lays down his weapon and is promptly carted off to the dungeons.
Abso-fucking-lutely beautiful.
In the dungeon with us is Glasses for some reason, who promptly gets bailed out by some mysterious benefactor. So long story short, there winds up being a bit of a cockatrice problem down here in the sewers. I wind up fighting for the privilege of slaying it in exchange for my freedom before running into Siegfried, who imparts a bit of information about how the Order of the Flaming Rose operates, which he's a member of. This is a group which serves the same eternal fire which the good Reverend spouted on and on about while he was alive. Siegfried, however, seems to be a lot more noble about it. He claims that the purpose of the Order is to protect humans from certain evils in the world, most notably monsters. He also claims that they do this without charging for their services. Geralt points out that they sure look like they're having a tough time with their obviously new armor and weapons in the service of the kingdom. While Siegfried offers to help you climb down through the sewers and take out any drowners along the way. Plus the cockatrice itself, of course. After the fight, he tells you that you'd probably get a good price for that monster's head, and gives you a key to get out of the sewers and into the city. I really like Siegfried. Guy is a class act through and through. But before he departs, some salamander assassins come flying down into the sewers to attack the two of us. After their dispatch, Siegfried notes that there are very few people who knew to check in the sewers for Geralt, which leaves him with a mystery to get to the bottom of. It's interesting because the way that Geralt's been mistreated by humans for so long still leaves him very wary and mistrusting of Siegfried despite how much the guys helped him out. But regardless, we now have our freedom again after a pretty damn rocky start here within Vizima's walls. We begin our endeavor after escaping by soft-locking the game. I tried talking to the town gossip at the same time that a cutscene triggered, and then I couldn't do anything. Fantastic start. After this minor inconvenience, I get to exploring. There's a lot to Vizima and Chapter 2 in general. 5 new contracts, quite a few side quests, and people to meet. Now, of course, these contracts require the knowledge of a few new creatures, which you can purchase for a pretty steep price. A lot of the stuff you're going to be spending your hard-earned money on is knowledge, oddly enough. But as far as the city of Vizima goes, it's kind of a shithole. It's this sprawling castle town lined with rows of housing complete with a hospital, a market street, and some slums. The whole town is obviously human-oriented, though quite a few dwarves and elves are holed up here too, trying to make a living despite the consistent racism towards their kind. But if anything unites these opposing races, it's the rain.
What a downpour!
I get sad when it rains.
Oh, when will this rain stop?
The quote-unquote nicer parts of the city only look slightly better than the shittier parts, and it gets pretty hard to look at after a while. Additionally, the entire city is under quarantine as a plague has broken out, which is just lovely. Why do I keep playing games with plagues and quarantines lately?
What's up?
So my side questing is relatively run-of-the-mill stuff, which has me slaying monsters and thugs. 2 of them actually take place in the same building, which is a little weird, but it does save me time. Eventually, I actually start investigating who decided to sick Salamandra on me, which leads me to a warehouse where the head of the city guard is pretending to be a dirty cop to get info. Once it's clear that these guys know nothing, he lets Geralt decimate the group, which is a pretty badass scene. From here, I meet up with a detective who tells me to question suspects until we get our guy. This has me questioning pretty much everyone that I can think of, but coming up short in nearly every regard. This entire chapter has you running around like a chicken with its head cut off, and I kind of get tired of it after an hour or 2. Now the good news is that the alchemist from the outskirts named Cultist gives me a way to fast travel from places of power. But the bad news is that there aren't any within the city itself, because they're one-way fast travel points back to Cultist's lab only. So while the fast travel is very welcome, the game hasn't become any less of a chore at this stage in particular. And the amount of quests I have right now is absolutely overwhelming. It's just a torrent of people asking you to do this thing and find this thing and help out in an assortment of ways. At this stage in the game, I'm just looking at a single quest at a time and going, okay, I know where that is, despite it possibly not being the most optimal quest to hit at the time. It's very much a Witcher thing, and it's one of the reasons that I never completed the 3rd game despite having very heavy interest in it. Well, eventually I complete just about as much as I can without bribing my way into the hospital or heading into the swamp. Oh yeah, there's an entirely different area attached to this act, making it that much more extensive. Well, the swamp is mostly for hunting, though it does have a few other quests attached to it. Namely trying to find these stones to open up an ancient wizard tower for Cultist, and chasing down more clues in the hopes of finding this Berengar guy. Well, Berengar seems to have met his end out here when I find his equipment on the ground. He seems to have been jumped by Salamandra before his death, but that's a dead end to this quest for now despite it still being in my quest log. But I really don't have too much more to say about the side questing, because while it isn't completely boring, it's definitely not worth mentioning. Like, it's just thing after thing. Ask some druids about a missing boy, craft a lightning rod to revive a golem and fight it, find the stones to open the tower, take a message back to a dwarf in town, find Zoltan and ask him about my silver sword. It just goes on and on. I mean, I knocked them out eventually, but covering every single one of them in depth would be a complete waste of breath. I will say that the golem fight is fucking ridiculous though, in that it took me about 8 minutes or so to whittle it down. It made me think that there might have been an easier way, but whatever. So back to the investigation. I've been slowly questioning and clearing people as best I can with the info that I've gathered. The list of suspects is extensive. We have the captain of the guard, Vincent, the alchemist, Cultist, a wealthy merchant, Luvarden, the leader of a gang who's at odds with Salamandra, a fence named Taller who buys stolen goods, and the owner of a bank named Vivaldi. The bank owner is actually bankrupt, as humans have taken over his business, meaning he couldn't personally fund the bale of glasses. Luvarden is actually paying for badges which Salamandra agents drop when killed, because the gang is bad for business. The leader of the opposing gang had an inside man who was trying to spy on Salamandra and wound up getting gutted. And Cultist claimed to have hired that same spy to help protect him from Salamandra, though I couldn't quite clear his name for sure. Actually, I couldn't clear his name, the captain's name, or the fence's name yet. This whole investigation is super intriguing, but it also leads to some really awkward cutscene banter.
I'm looking for the leader of a certain organization.
You suspect me because I'm a dwarf?
I have several suspects, not only dwarves.
What do you want?
I've got my eye on you.
Come back when you stop talking crap.
I want to discuss Salamandra.
Why?
The professor's bail money came from your bank.
You offend me deeply with this slander.
I don't believe you. Nothing but a pile of suspicions. I have to assume you're clean for now.
Yeah, it's awkward as hell. And it's weird because most of the other dialogue in this game isn't this rickety. It must have something to do with the game checking to see what I found out step by step. The more important thing to note here is that after you've found various clues pointing towards or away from the suspects, Geralt can question them and deem them either guilty or innocent. For example, if I go to the captain and tell him that I don't believe him about anything, Geralt becomes convinced that the guy is guilty. He's not, but Geralt thinks that he is. Although I will note here that I can't prove that the captain is innocent on my save because I decided to give the Scoia'tael some weapons earlier in Chapter 1. Well, basically they used those weapons to kill a guy who would have helped Geralt see that the captain was innocent, once again making another decision of mine have a negative consequence on my game. I actually do like this a lot, and it lends more replayability than the previous decision with the Frightener. I mentioned that I also hired a detective to help me out with his investigation. The guy has some good pointers, but I've done a pretty damn good job so far by myself. In fact, there's a point where I go back to report to him and he's in the process of getting jumped by some salamandra. After the fight, he tells me that he's going to hole up somewhere else and that he'll contact me when he has new information. So I step outside and suddenly he has new information. Neat. So I'm now to find Shani and try to get her to do an autopsy on the spy who got wounded when trying to get info about Salamandra, the same guy that Cultist hired. Apparently someone helped him along to his death after being wounded in the hospital, but there's only one way for sure to find out. Something that did stick out to me is that... Okay, so in this game you got this big goofy wolf amulet plastered in the top left. I have it set to detect monsters, so when those are around it shakes around to let me know. And it definitely very recently started to shake around like crazy near the detective here. So I meet with Shani and we conduct the autopsy, and it becomes obvious pretty quickly that the spy was poisoned by alchemical means. Of course, with something that blatant, we can easily point fingers at the alchemist Cultist, but stopping by the detective house yields a more interesting turn. The detective is ready to blame the rival gang leader and Cultist together, but Geralt finds the opportunity to question the detective himself. He points out the vibrating amulet. He points out the brand new political map on the wall that's marked with pins. He points out the brand new extravagant carpets. And he points out that he's heard some pretty nasty rumors regarding the detective and various women. But all of this is explained away by the witty detective who disregards these ideas at every turn. So it's time to get to the bottom of this thing once and for all. I head to the cemetery and start digging through the crypt here before finding our guy's body. Yep, we've definitely been getting played for a while now apparently. So my options are as follows. Go confront Big Man who's disguised himself as the detective, or go talk to Cultist to get his thoughts on the situation. Well, I try the former and it's an automatic game over when I proceed with it. Big Man has some powerful fire magic, and he one-shots me after I fight with his assassins for a bit. So option B is the right choice here as I confer with Cultist. Well, what we come up with is that the tower that we've been trying to get into this whole time is the perfect place to stage an ambush on Big Man, since it's surrounded by water and apparently that's a big weakness for such a potent fire mage. So I talk to Big Man who thinks that I believe him to be the detective, and I tell him that we need to get into the wizard tower so that I can give him some ancient books to hide away. He readily agrees and we head off to it. Well, the scene that plays out leads into a fight against Big Man and Glasses, who take about a quarter of their full health before deciding to retreat. Glasses knocks out Geralt with some kind of poison, which makes you wonder if they could just cover their mouths and noses and finish him off or something. They don't do that though, instead opting to leave Geralt on the ground as they escape through a portal. This concludes Chapter 2, which was an absolute doozy of a chapter. I know I didn't go super hard into details, but I did a lot. I probably spent 12 to 15 hours just running around back and forth. I felt overloaded with knowledge at every given moment. It was like I had a set of tasks in my head. First I have to find Shani, then I have to go talk to the captain before the sun goes down, then I gotta go talk to the gravedigger, then I gotta wait until midnight and head to the hospital. It was never ending. I felt like a task manager on a PC. And every time I closed a task, another 1 to 3 would pop up in my head. This kind of questing is hectic. And you know what the most fucked up part is? For as much as I did do, I still didn't complete everything that I could have done. There were quite a few things that I remember doing before that I didn't do now, but I feel like if I continued to try to completionist Chapter 2, I would have gone nuts. So when Geralt gets knocked out, apparently the Scoia'tael and the humans have now launched into full-scale battle against one another. Geralt has remained neutral at this stage, but the ending of Chapter 2 makes it clear that he's going to have to pick a side here. I picked the Scoia'tael before, and I can't help but do the same again. Many of the humans here have treated Geralt like shit at nearly every given opportunity save a few, and the elves and dwarves deserve their freedom too. When Geralt wakes up, Triss has retrieved him from the swamp. She's currently talking into her magic mirror to someone about the various political strings that she's pulling before the topic of Geralt gets brought up. Triss tells the person in the mirror that she can control him just fine, and the person warns her that Geralt is much more perceptive than she's giving him credit for. Of course, Geralt is awake and pretending to sleep through all this. So Triss decides that instead of directly manipulating him, she's going to put the fear of God in him instead.
Should you be up? I'd rather make sure you've recovered completely.
Thank God this goes back to normal after a moment. It was giving me anxiety. So anyways, Triss fucks Geralt as is tradition. No sex card though. Then she tells him the same thing that he told himself, that he has to choose between the Scoia'tael and the humans. Though her reasoning is that taking a firm stance will help him reclaim his lost memories. She also elaborates that she believes that monsters are appearing in Vizima due to a magical anomaly, but she hasn't figured out what's happening yet. So she gives you some magic sensors to help pinpoint the location of said anomaly. She also explains that the princess who Geralt saved in the opening cutscene is a bit obsessed with him and that she's attending a banquet which the wealthy merchant Luvarden from before is throwing.
I don't like banquets.
And now we're free to do as we please. The first thing to note here is that Triss's magic mirror in the corner serves as a teleport to the alchemist or the swamp tower, which is awesome. And even better news than that is that it's not just a one-way travel system. The only thing that would make this more convenient is if I had a trinket which could teleport me at any given time by activating it. But oh well. So Chapter 3's new area to explore is the Trade Quarter of Vizima. It's a much better looking place than the previous Temple Quarter, and boasts a ton of new NPCs to trade and interact with, a staggering amount of new monster contracts, and the most amount of bangable women so far. I get pretty overwhelmed with what to do first, so I decide to just beeline it for the 3 magic sensor locations after upgrading my armor. When I return back to Triss, she hits me with the info that the anomaly which is causing widespread monster attacks within the city is actually Alvin. Triss tells me that the boy probably has elder blood, which is basically genes which were passed down from an extraordinarily powerful elven sorceress. Triss insists that I take Alvin back to her, which leads us into back-to-back videos where 2 love options exist and only one can win outright. On my way to grab Alvin, Shani cuts me off and tells me to not give Alvin to the witch, instead demanding that the boy go with her. There's again only one correct answer here in the love decision, and that's Triss all day. There once were 2 games released the same year. Each started a franchise which all held dear. In both you must choose, one girl had to lose, but the choice was always clear. One girl was a medic, one girl was a witch, the other a researcher, and the last one a bitch. Sorry, I just met Dandelion and I couldn't help myself. You see, Dandelion is a bard friend of Geralt who's always looking for new inspiration for his ballads and poetry. We first encounter him when heading back to pick up Alvin, and he gives us some dire news. Apparently some men have kidnapped the boy and made off with him. Fortunately, Dandelion saw where they went, so Geralt pursues and dispatches the men. As reinforcements arrive, Geralt has to choose where to send Alvin, with his options being Triss or Shani. Again, we're going with Triss. Not to say that Shani is a bad character, I just don't... I don't know, personal preference and all that. Geralt and Triss have a stronger history, and Triss definitely seems to be more capable than Shani does to me, especially knowing that Alvin is some kind of magical being. Either way, Geralt takes out the rest of the men and then decides to celebrate by draining some Fistech down his throat, which is a highly potent and illegal drug. Yeah, I had it on my hotbar as a means of storage and I fat-fingered it by accident. After sleeping off the drugs, I report back to Triss, who tells me to tell Shani to fuck off.
Is Shani clear about this? No? Then go tell her the boy stays with me. End it.
Oh boy. So I go to Shani and tell her that I sent the boy to Triss, and she tells me to fuck off instead. Well, that makes my life easier. I head back to Triss and she tells me that she wants a ring from me to make her feel better about this whole setup. Man. Just as I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to afford a ring with 3 shekels to my name, Dandelion phases in from the nether and escorts me to the pub. We meet up with Zoltan for some sage wisdom to help out Geralt with the process of suddenly being half married or something.
A rather unpleasant tension that accompanies the appearance of 2 conflicting cognitions, be they thoughts or judgments.
You're so full of shit, Dandelion. Triss is a fine woman.
But
I'm a witcher. Killing monsters is my destiny. You may be right, but honestly, do you see me as a cobbler or a farmer?
No. I guess I see your point. Just because a woman doesn't say it, doesn't mean she doesn't want it. In fact, they often say they want something when they really want the opposite.
I'll drink to that.
there's just no understanding women.
Highly original, Dandelion.
Right. The family is the fundamental unit of society. Screw it all. I've got the hiccups.
Geralt, you reek, and have woken all the neighbors. What kind of role model are you?
I'm out of here.
I love this scene. Poor guy has no idea what the hell he's doing as a monster slayer who wants a family but thought that he could never have one.
Triss has made me look at stupid pictures.
She must have her reasons.
Pictures are stupid.
Great. I would be on board if she was trying to make him look at words, but pictures? Fucking hellspawn. So I drudge about looking for work and rings and all that. I wind up doing a little more less than notable side questing before I scrounge up some gold and quite a selection of rings. Now Triss told me that she wants any ring, but when I return and chuck one at her, she goes, I was thinking one with rubies. God damn it. I know. I chose this.
So you love me and have forgotten her?
Triss,
You're sweet, you know. The only one I trust. You've endured a lot. Time for a reward. The little one's asleep, so let me show you some real magic.
So I decide to head over to the banquet despite Geralt's disdain for them. This feast somehow epitomizes the quest structure of this game in a small set of rooms. So first you have to talk to every notable person here. You've got to talk to Luvarden, you've got to talk to the fence, Taller, you got to talk to Princess Ada, you've got to talk to Velarad, who's the man who's taken up temporary rule while the King of Temeria is away, and you have to talk to this shithead named DeWet, who openly admonishes the idea of a Witcher being here. After you're through talking to everyone, you can go back to Velarad to ask him how the princess has gotten along since she was cured from being a Striga.
Is she aggressive?
On occasion, but not unusual for a spoiled damsel. I don't know, she's...
What?
Well...
Spit it out.
She needs a man to give her a proper lay.
Music to Geralt's ears. So he gets to work, chatting up the princess and telling her that her ideas aren't stupid.
Politics is not unlike a tryst. It begins with foreplay, glances, conversations. Behold that witch with Luvarden. Now look to our noble Erkin and the courtiers. The dance grows bolder, fondling and such. Then one is consumed by the desire to come together roughly, like animals.
Velarad seems to have hit the nail on the head, Jesus. So then she says she wants something tasty to eat, and I have to talk to Velarad again, who wants some strong alcohol. Like I said, this entire room is a miniature version of every quest in this game. I give the guy the alcohol and he goes, yeah, the princess loves raw meat. Go ask Taller what she wants. Now this is where things get interesting. So like I said, Taller was the fence from chapter 2. But he's also a very high up spy for the Empire. He has a lot of information and connections to offer you, and his demeanor is completely transformed from where you found him in the streets of the Temple Quarter. He explains that a huge political uprising is about to take place, and that you can't remain neutral during it, further reinforcing Geralt's thoughts from the start of the chapter. He also explains that DeWet is being used by the princess as a pawn, seeing as he's from the opposing nation of Nilfgaard.
Like most knights of the Order, he worries his dick's too small, so he gets aggressive whenever something scares him. Then of course, he's a Nilfgaardian.
So anyways, Taller didn't seem to have the info on the princess's favorite dish. So I went over to a knight who supposedly had taken a vow of silence and I drink with him until we're both blasted. He gives me a ring after breaking his vow, and then I go back to Taller and can ask him about the favorite dish. Of course, he wants me to go to the other room and stealthily nab a letter to bring it back to him. God, this game. So I drunkenly stumble over to a chest, grab the letter and a few other things before some fucker comes in and asks what I'm up to. I tell him that I'm looking for a stronger drink, and offer him some before I get so drunk that they toss me out. Fortunately, this gets rid of a lot of the screen wavering, and then I can just pop back in. I get Triss to magically conjure me up some steak with her plot hole filling powers before presenting it to the princess. She then invites me to her chambers where I give her the business. So at the end of all of this nonsense, Luvarden wants to talk to me about wiping out Salamandra once and for all. Being a merchant, his suggestion is to hit them where it hurts financially. Since their king export and moneymaker is Fistek, I'm to infiltrate and destroy 2 new bases which have popped up in the slums and the swamp. And just like that, we're back at the part of the game where I'm running around nearly aimlessly while completing side quests and acquiring new goods and knowledge. I'll run through the highlights and skip out on the weaker stuff as usual. So when I first pop outside of the inn, there's a disagreement between Taller and DeWet. DeWet claims to have an official edict proclaiming that Taller has been absolved of his responsibilities for the Temerian Intelligence Service, and Taller claims that this edict isn't signed, that it's a forgery. I can choose to either kill Taller on the spot or to let him walk, and it's a very easy choice seeing as DeWet has constantly hurled insults at me since I met the bastard. Afterwards, I meet Taller in the inn and he proves that the edict was false, which explains his presence in The Witcher 3. After this, I recover Dandelion's loot for him and kill a widow's ghostly husband before heading down to the sewers. It's here where I find a troop of Scoia'tael who are trying to excavate an elven rune before being attacked by a monster. I clear the place out before this guy named Yavin comes sauntering in from the portal. We've talked to him a bit in Chapter 2, but he basically leads the charge for the Scoia'tael in this game. After he gains access to the sewers, him and his men move on to rob the bank in the trade quarter. It's at this stage where I have to make another crucial decision. Either I can join the Scoia'tael, side with the humans, or attempt to remain neutral for a little longer. The latter option there gets me nowhere as Yavin insists that I choose. This is actually a tough decision for me. When I think of the Order, I think of Siegfried, the man who stood up for me and treated me more like a fellow human than most other humans. But I also think of the fanaticism and racism which runs rampant throughout the rest of the Order. When I think of the Scoia'tael, I think of outcasts who have fought tooth and nail for the same freedoms which humans have. But I also think of their fanaticism and honestly also racist ways which many of them exude, maybe due solely to the fact that they've been treated the way that they have. And after thinking about it, the Scoia'tael win out, if only by a small margin. I just haven't seen a reason for them to be treated the way that they have beyond being different, and their methods are often extremely cruel and unforgiving when dealing with non-humans. So I side with Yavin and help out the unit of non-humans escape through the sewers with the bank's deed of ownership. Their hopes are that giving the deed back to its proper dwarven owner will set things right. It's worth mentioning that at this stage, talking to Siegfried yields him to be verbally hostile towards you. He says that he'd kill you for what you did if it weren't for the fact that it's against the law, which sucks to hear, more so just because I really like Siegfried as a character. But it is what it is. And I guess I have to accept that him and his bowl cut will be pissed with me now. So next up, we've got the case of a roaming werewolf, except that it hasn't killed anyone yet, or at least that information is withheld. The werewolf in question is the love of the owner of a brothel in the slums, Carmen. Well, Carmen asks for you to come up with a cure for lycanthropy, and we try to get that information out of the druids in the swamp. Unfortunately, they're not too confident in their answer, but they point me in the direction of weaving a shirt out of fool's parsley and then figuring out who the werewolf is to even see if they can be saved. Well, Carmen won't part with the guy's name, so we're on another goose chase. Or wolf chase, I guess. Now, I've played this game before, so I do know who the werewolf in question is, and it's the captain of the guard, Vincent. But we can't do anything else until we've determined that information. So to actually get to the stage where we find out that Vincent is the werewolf, I have to do part of the main quest to attempt to discover who was supplying Fistek to the slums. I wind up chasing a guy across the map before cornering him for more information.
You're one stubborn son of a whore. I'll make you regret this.
I asked nicely and got nothing. Maybe this will work.
So we glean the intel that the operation is taking someplace in the sewers, and head down there before stumbling into a huge drug operation. There are tons and tons of bodies here, maybe close to 40 or so total. I'm actually oddly impressed by this. For 2007, this is quite a lot of people crammed into an area, and it's pretty realistic for a mid-level drug operation. The performance does suffer a bit when all of these bodies tend to come together. You might have actually noticed that in the temple quarter of town every here and there. But still, it's pretty ambitious for its time. So I loot the place before getting another lead, which causes all of these assassins to turn hostile. Now, I don't think that I fought said 40 bandits, but I'd say that I wound up murdering closer to 20 or so. Still, it felt really good. At this stage in the game, Geralt is nearly unstoppable. Hell, I'd say he's nearly unstoppable at any stage of the game. There have definitely been instances where I've died or had a close call, but usually that's before I decide to load up on potions. Once those come out, I usually have nearly no issues. I don't know what it's like on the harder difficulty, but on normal, Geralt really feels like he is the Witcher Enhanced Edition. I mean, at this stage, I've got pretty much every single bronze talent that I want. The leveling system is a little weird in that regard. You start by getting 3 bronze talents every level until you hit level 15. That's already 42 talents at your disposal just from leveling up. Then after that, you continue getting 3 bronze talents and a silver talent until level 20, so another 15 bronze talents. At this stage, I get 2 bronze and 2 silver talents per level, and I'm really just picking up convenient things like reducing the amount of time I'm drunk by 50%. As intimidating as the leveling system seemed at first, it becomes pretty trivial by mid-game as far as building Geralt the way that you want him. After I effectively halt the sewer supply of drugs, I need to get to the swamp to cut off that supply too. This has me completing a few of my other contracts and trophy missions, which is nice. Though it was also my choice to not pursue these quests until now, so it isn't so much about good game design as much as it is about adjusting to how the game works. Anyways, Salamandra have forced the peasants in the swamp to start gathering their drug-producing herbs, which has me liberating 3 camps of peasants from their overseers before moving to the main camp. The main camp has an assload of men, but the swallow potion that I chugged helped me clear it without too much issue. After gathering the last bit of evidence, it's time to head back to Luvarden to plan our next step. After some time passes, our guy identifies that the last bit of the drug operation is stationed in an otherwise forbidden to enter district. Well, true to his secret society crap, he gives me a password and tells me to speak it to every guard officer that I come across in the hopes that I might find the right one so that it'll let me into the district that I need to be in. This goes about as well as you would think.
The lily has yet to be engulfed by fire.
What? Do you want flowers or something?
I mean...
Go and bother somebody else.
The lily has yet to be engulfed by fire.
What? Is that a password?
Is it?
Wait. Are you testing me? Hey lads, I think we've got a troublemaker.
I better go.
We eventually find our man who decides to fuck with us first before running a ladder down to the sewers. Not a key to a sealed off area, a fucking ladder. Right on. I feel like I'm playing an old school NES game. So we stumble upon the hideout and the salamanders here are in the course of pleading with someone on the other end of a magic mirror. They ask him for assistance, to which he declines outright before Geralt lops their heads off. Then Geralt decides to chat up the figure, who turns out to be Radovid. That doesn't mean too much to us at this stage, but Radovid's a pretty key figure in the Witcher universe, seeing as he's the king of the Kingdom of Redania. He respects that Geralt is willing to threaten him despite just meeting the guy, and imparts the knowledge that he initially sought to use Salamandra for political gain, but decided against it. He insists that him and Geralt are on the same side, but that's all we get out of him before he leaves us. So I nabbed the stone that was used to contact him along with another stone on a mage and returned to Triss to try to figure out what's going on. Or at least I would be returning, but this is where Vincent the werewolf comes into play. So we step outside into this rain-filled evening and rate a salamander's cock a solid 8.5 out of 10 before cutting his throat. This is when we spot the absolute stupidest looking werewolf I have ever seen in my life. This chunky Walmart brand PB&J werewolf skulks around like it's got a load in its invisible pants at all times, taking out Salamandra and teleporting across rooftops. This cutscene is some of the most hilariously janky shit I've probably seen in any game to date. I fucking love it, I can't even take it seriously. Well, eventually Vincent stands face to face with Geralt.
Geralt. You know me?
It's me. It's me, Captain Vincent.
It really is the gift that keeps on giving. So after conversing with the guy about what I found, he claims that he doesn't want to be cured. I can choose to kill him if I want, and the resulting fur that he drops will net me a pretty slick mutagenic potion which grants me a staggering plus 50% attack and dodge from midnight until dawn. But I do want to help Carmen out. So I talk to her again and she relents after I tell her that I know that her lover is Vincent. First we try out the parsley shirt, which, yeah, that doesn't work. Then we go to Cultist, who tells me that he'll brew up a lycanthropy cure for me.
The potion needs a virgin's tear to work.
Wait, you said nothing about a virgin.
You said a young maiden. I assumed she wasn't yet married.
Cultist, you need to get out more. Where will I find a virgin?
A virgin's tear is vital. It can't be difficult to find one.
So Geralt sets out to raid the one place where he hasn't slammed every box in a 30-meter radius, the hospital. He grabs a nearby nurse and demands that she squirt some eye juice into his bottle before running back to Carmen and demanding that she make Vincent chug the virgin's tears. Well, Kalkstein's brew of human juices and ordinary swamp water doesn't seem to do the trick. So it's time for the most exotic and insidious cure of all, true love. It's clear that Carmen loves Vincent and has offered to do anything for him, but Big V has a hard time deciding between her and work. So you go to talk to him and he decides to give love a chance or whatever. And thus concludes the tale of the werewolf watchman and the brothel baron. It was a little UPS-ish for my tastes, but the ending's about as cute as you're gonna get in this game. Let's hit one more halfway interesting quest that I wound up doing before pressing into more of the main stuff. This next one is a case where a knight at the inn thinks that his sister's been abducted by vampires. He describes his sister as having bite marks on her neck before her disappearance, and also describes her as having blue eyes. Apparently, blue eyes are so uncommon in Vizima that it's just the main thing that we're looking for besides the bite mark, of course. Well, eventually we find her at a very upscale brothel, which she's now working at. She seems happy to be here, so I inquire with the boss, who has the same character model as the other brothel leader, Carmen. I really wish they would have given her a different model. I mean, this is supposed to be a real upscale place, and she has the same ripped clothing as the slums brothel women. Granted, I did download a mod to give them slightly different clothing, but their vanilla models are also identical and have ripped parts in their fishnets. At least the Queen of the Night got better treatment in Gwent. Wait, no, her gloves are torn in places in that too. Weird. Anyways, the Queen of the Night feigns ignorance until I report back to the blue-eyed girl's brother, who insists that I inquisitor the ever-living fuck out of the brothel. So I stomp back to the Queen intending to do just that. She's like, okay, yeah, so I'm a vampire and all these girls are vampires, but so what? I just drink a little blood from patrons in exchange for sex. No one dies, blood is like alcohol to me, and it's all a fair trade. Huh. Yeah, that doesn't seem all that bad. So your options are as such. 1. Have a foursome. And 2. Kill them. That's a tough choice. Ugh. After this, the brother comes marching in and he's not very happy for some reason. So you can side with him, side with the girls, or be a neutral party and kill them all. And if you wind up siding with the knight, his sister will ask you to kill her brother afterwards. So there's definitely quite a few routes for a mere side quest. Either way, the quest completes with all the humans dead. The blue-eyed girl thanks Geralt for his humanity, despite his very obvious inner conflict rising to the surface about helping monsters instead of slaying them. This is the second time that Geralt has had this internal clash of emotions, as he tends to try to put neutrality first and foremost alongside doing his job for coin. But he's broken both of these tenets very recently, and it's only adding to his confusion. Triss explains that the old Geralt she knew would always talk about neutrality this way while fucking things up and letting affairs of the heart win. So it does sound like we're guiding him down the right path so far. Anyways, before I continue on, let's move over to our returning sponsor for this video, Audible. So Audible offers a range of services from audiobooks to podcasts to stuff like theatrical performances all in one place. I'm personally always looking for new things to listen to while I'm editing videos, and Audible rounds out that role nicely. I actually used to take some time to sit at a cafe and read like a hipster before, the disease struck. So now I just work in my goblin cave and listen to the books that I would have read instead. I actually just finished Shades of Grey by Jasper Fforde. Not to be confused with the other Grey Shades book that everyone has heard about. It's a pretty damn interesting novel about a society which revolves around humans that can only see certain colors. The better your color perception, the higher up your societal class ranking is. It's an awesome work of fiction that I couldn't help but listen to over the course of 3 days or so. But if audiobooks aren't your thing, there are tons of different podcasts, language learning resources, original entertainment from celebrity creators, and that's just naming a few of the services that Audible has to offer. And as an Audible Plus member, the Plus catalog opens up way more content for you to binge through on your way to and from work or school or whatever it is that you have to do. You can even start by listening on your PC and pick things back up on your phone or tablet if you gotta move partway through your 12-hour-long book for some reason. If any of this sounds like it's something that you can make use of during those stretches of boring moments, then please feel free to visit audible.com/saltfactory or text Salt Factory to 500-500. Thanks, guys. Anyways, let's get back to the main quest stuff. So we bring these magic stones back to Luvarden, who goes, "Ew, magic. Take that shit to Triss." So I head to her and she tells me that she can hacker man these stones into giving up the location of whoever they communicated with. She then points me in the direction of the house where one of the stones was communicating with. Here we find King Radovid just hanging out. No personal guard, no protectors, no witnesses. Perfectly assassinatable. Anyways, Radovid claims that he wants several things. 1. To figure out which group of Nilfgaardians killed his father, the former king. 2. To bring order to his lands. And 3. To put an end to the likes of sorcerers and sorceresses, as in his mind they cannot be trusted. He says that that third one isn't going to happen for a while, but it definitely comes up in the later entries into the series. As always, Geralt isn't too interested in politics, but obviously Radovid is all politics. His entire goal here is to hopefully wed Princess Ada to gain political leverage, but the issue right now is with the edicts that are coming out of Temeria's King Cultist. I guess this is something that I haven't really quite covered yet, but I mentioned that King Cultist has been out of the picture as far as Vizima is concerned for the entire game so far. No one knows where or why, he's just away. In the king's absence, Velerad has been temporarily watching over the city and enforcing any edicts which the king passes along. Well, Radovid here claims that these new edicts that are enforcing lockdowns and curfews are all fake, which reinforces Taller's claims from earlier. Again, Geralt has no interest in this stuff, but this is definitely something that we're gonna have to deal with regardless. So I head back to Luvarden, who tells me that I need to gather allies to hopefully expel the salamanders from the city once and for all. My choices are between the Scoia'tael and the Order of the Flaming Rose. And because of my actions earlier, I think my decision is already made. So I meet with Yavin, and he agrees to help me since I helped him. Something interesting to note here is that although I openly opposed the Order earlier on, I'm still allowed to freely move and trade throughout the city with nearly everyone. Like, Velerad still accepts contracts which I complete despite him openly being upset with me for helping the Scoia'tael. Stuff like that. Well, Yavin here explains that he believes that Geralt has someone with a lot of power watching out for him in the city, which might explain the lack of punishment for actively helping outlaws. So I have him meet me over at the inn in the trade district along with Triss and Luvarden. On my way in, Vincent stops me to tell me that someone tipped off Salamandra about the meeting, and that a group of assassins are on their way to take us out. The former lycanthrope has brought reinforcements, and we make quick work of the agents as they pour through the inn's doors. Oddly enough, a little illustrated cutscene plays out with Geralt narrating that we made a big choice regarding Vincent. But this happens mid-fight. After it's over, the fight continues. I wonder if that was supposed to happen that way. Anyways, we run up to Triss, Yavin, and Luvarden, the 3 red squiggles of the apocalypse in my script. And we come to the conclusion that we can attack the Salamandra base whenever we're ready. Well, right on time, here comes dumbass DeWet, who's pissed that I slapped him around like a little baby boy at dice poker before this. He's like, "Come out here, we know there's a fucking elf in that room." And Triss panic casts a teleport to the Salamandra hideout.
He's right, Geralt. This may be our only chance. Akimbaga hara.
I once saw a mage who emerged from a teleport without his legs. They arrived 5 seconds later.
On 3, we break the door down.
Maybe there's another way.
Dakambra der Hadrin.
So when Geralt arrives not dead in the Salamandra hideout, he begins kicking ass so hard that my game crashes, which is fun. So eventually we kick ass in the developer-intended way, which has us unleashing Scoia'tael into the chambers to take on Salamandra. When we make it to the end, Glasses and Big Man stand ready to lecture us. Big Man does all the talking, Glasses is his hype man throwing up gang signs in the background.
You're fighting for a cause in the name of vague principles. You're in a labyrinth of other people's schemes. You don't know the grand plan.
The conclusion of this conversation is that Geralt is a pawn being used by higher powers. Which, to be fair, Geralt kind of knew already. Big Man states that King Foltest allowed his Striga-transformed daughter to rampage across the countryside, terrorizing citizens before Geralt cured her. That he allowed Nilfgaard to tear through the neighboring kingdoms during the war and do the same. That he's an insufficient leader and that the Lodge of Sorceresses which Triss belongs to aren't any better. He claims that Salamandra are the freedom fighters here, which, yeah, I'd say it's not so black and white as to effectively paint a veritable good guy and bad guy in this situation, which is a great way to build a good villain. Not to say that Salamandra is washed clean of their transgressions either, seeing as they've enslaved people and dealt drugs to whoever's buying. So now at the crux of this encounter, it's time to take on Big Man again.
You won't surprise me this time. Now, die! How has your shield? I have no counterspell.
Or not. Yeah, Triss casted some powerful barrier from the ancient knowledge in the Swamp Tower, and apparently that was enough to ward off Big Man from even attacking. Talk about anticlimactic. So it's now up to Geralt to lower the barrier, which, either of the two cast to prevent the Scoia'tael from joining him. So I run to the next corridor and start taking out more salamanders before the game crashes. So third time's the charm with this place, as I manage to make it to Glasses, who goes down pretty easily after stating that Geralt is a shitty witcher because he always thinks too much with his emotions. This ties to a lot of decisions which he's made regarding certain monsters throughout his journey, which is a nice addition to Geralt's personal journey throughout his amnesiac state. Glasses then states that they want the mutagens which make witchers so that they can make witchers with no emotion. Ones that kill monsters without a second thought.
You were meant to slay monsters without making judgments, philosophizing or nursing doubts. You're ineffective.
Well, this ineffective, doubt-ridden historical freak is about to kill you. Let's dance.
Well, Geralt parries Glass's second to last ditch crossbow bolt before his real last ditch bolt hits a glass container which explodes on impact. We both fall to the bottom of this cave before a Kikamor queen rises up and smokes Glasses. This next bit is 100% shitty design no matter how you slice it. I get what they were going for, but I just completely disagree with the way that it's presented. So as I'm exiting the cave, the queen resurfaces and faces me down. I turn around to go fight it, and it one-shots me. Okay, so I guess I'm running. Now mind you, I already popped 2 potions to help me with any sort of escape here, but they aren't needed as I soon find out. So I run through and get cut off by a swarm of workers. I try to ard them only for the structure they were underneath to one-shot me. So it becomes clear what I need to do, as Geralt helpfully states that I should shoot the supports this time around. So I run through and do just that, collapsing the supports around me. Then I beeline it to the exit before realizing that maybe I need to collapse these other bits too. Geralt oddly states that I should harvest the queen, which I ignore. So I turn back around and here she comes. I try to ard the other supports, but nothing happens. And then the whole place comes down. As I'm dying, I realize that Geralt's dialogue triggered as I hit the exit despite the fact that the queen hadn't caught up yet. I'm just supposed to wait here in the tunnel for her to get caught in the collapse. So I do the whole thing again, only to realize that I need to collapse all 3 supports leading to the big cave. So one last time I collapse the 3 archways, and I don't even encounter a single spot of resistance. It's like the smoothest escape ever. What a shitty boss encounter. It's not tough, it's just a pseudo puzzle where I have to perform steps that I've never had to perform up until this point. I guess unless you count the Frightener fight, which was kind of like that. Alright, so I grab all of these perfectly preserved documents and evidence from the monster's corpse. But I don't read any of it because the cave's collapsing and I'm role-playing. Fuck it, why not? So I run out and here's a group of city guard and order agents, ready to execute me. Up strides Ada, who goes, "So, I see you have figured out my schemes to usurp the throne from my father while he's away." What? No, I was just running for my life. I didn't figure any of that out. Anyways, yeah, it was all the princess who was working with Salamandra to blah blah blah. It kinda makes sense, but I also wonder if she decided to fuck Geralt before or after she decided to kill him here. It does make a difference, honestly. So Ada strides up dangerously within hostage territory before Geralt demands that he gets his last request. So she grants it, and his wish is, get this shit, his wish is to kiss her. Never change, Geralt. Well, Triss gets in the way of his request and magics him away with magic. I still would have rather have seen him taking her hostage with the kiss, but whatever. This works, I guess. This is the end of Chapter 3, as Chapter 4 greets us with our next main character, Giraffe Girl. Well, Double G sees Geralt portal in from time and space and goes, "Shh." Yeah, that's definitely a regular human response and definitely not the response of a giraffe in disguise. Well, Double G is our exposition lass of the game. I can ask her all sorts of shit. Where am I? What's happened here? Who am I? Is this place safe? And my favorite question, I saw a city.
You're ugly, but I like you.
I'm completely lost.
Well, this is where shit somehow gets weirder than it has been, as literal fish people have made their homes in the lakeside here and pay tribute to the so-called Lady of the Lake.
LOL.
They talk like Star Wars characters, but Geralt doesn't seem to mind. After interrogating this one, he tells me that another Witcher has made his way through here recently, which Geralt gets excited about before making his way inland. Lakeside it's definitely different from where we've been already. There's a lot thrown at Geralt almost immediately. Seeing as he had to abandon a lot of his quests before, the devs saw fit to toss a load at him to make up for it. This has me running around and getting my bearings while stumbling into quest after quest.
Could I use your boat?
Chapter 4 is probably the most fantastical and fairy tale-esque chapter of the game. It takes place across 4 brand new different regions. There's the aforementioned lakeside, a field of rolling plains, a village with a river surrounded by fields known as Murky Waters, and a single island which you can borrow a boat to get to. The big thing that's happening in Murky Waters is a clusterfuck of a marriage which has been arranged between the village chief's daughter and a wealthy merchant. Apparently, she loves someone else, and her sister loves the guy that she's marrying. We're gonna get to that mess in a bit. Let's hit some notable side quest stuff first. Obviously, there are trophy monsters and some random side quests like giving bread to a cluster of elves that have made camp on the shore, or gathering Noonwraith dust to give to a woman who wants to weave it into an amulet to ward off a succubus who's been banging her husband. But beyond all that, there's also the Lady of the Lake, who's a goddess who lives on the island. Both the fish people and the humans pray to her. Talking to the lady tends to get pretty heavy at times with the whole machinations of destiny and where Geralt fits into it. And yet oftentimes the dialogue is just as lighthearted and silly to break up the doom and gloom.
Milady, your eyes are like stars glimmering in the night sky.
Distant and cold. Weak, Witcher.
Your ass puts others to shame.
Speaking to the lady reveals that she used to be surrounded by knights who served her, but then they all ran off to chase the legend of the Holy Grail and never returned. She encourages me to speak to one of her last remaining servants about the Grail, an old hermit who lives in a hut out in the fields. Well, the hermit fills you in on possible theories revolving around the Grail and also points you towards something called a Druid Stone, which is apparently in the process of being hunted by spirits led by the King of the Wild Hunt. This actually isn't the first time that we've had a run-in with the Wild Hunt, as a quest earlier had Geralt facing his decision so far in the game when the king decided to summon the ghost of Leo to fight Geralt and sow seeds of doubt within his decision-making. Obviously, the Wild Hunt is a much bigger topic in the third game of the series, but for now it remains a mysterious and haunting entity. One of the bigger things that we do find out is that Berengar is alive and well here on the lakeside. When Geralt finally finds the guy and readies his questions, Berengar is almost ridiculously standoffish. He manages to call into question Geralt's combat ability and call Vesemir an old fool in practically the same sentence before running further into the cave to take on some monsters. I assist in this endeavor, but I'm more interested in the ancient set of armor which Berengar mentions rather than the Witcher himself. Well, Big B keeps heading further and further into the cave before eventually telling you to meet him at his campfire nearby. When I get to him, he's still not very talkative. He's extraordinarily passive-aggressive and constantly picks at Geralt for being a Witcher who doesn't question much, who's built up a legend for himself. The only info that we get out of the guy for now is that he feels like he was forced to become a Witcher in the same way that he was forced to become an outlaw by Salamandra, basically stating that they threatened his life if he didn't work for them. As soon as he saw an opportunity, he bolted, before making it to the lakeside here. Since then, he's been searching for this legendary armor which was said to belong to a Witcher named Raven forever ago. Eventually, the Lady of the Lake requests that you speak with Berengar to ask him more about how he feels about his destiny, because she can't tell if the visions that she's been seeing pertains to him or Geralt. Well, I head back to Berengar and he basically tells me to go fuck myself with this destiny crap, and then continues to state that he resents Witchers because they forced him to never be able to have his own kids or family. As much as I can empathize with that logic, I can't get behind the way that he constantly kicks Geralt around just for existing as someone who seems to be alright with his fate as a Witcher. Nearly every little thing out of his mouth seems to be laced with some sideways comment about Geralt being the chosen one. Geralt, of course, only tries to curb his ire, but it doesn't work at all. After simply asking about how Berengar feels about destiny, he blows his lid at Geralt again before stating that he actually willingly worked with Salamandra to provide them with data on how Witchers tick, and that he let them experiment on him for the chance at somehow undoing the transformations to his body. So I report back to the lady, who realizes that she's been seeing visions about Geralt's future then, and that she'd be willing to help him later. Again, the old issue of quest structure rears its ugly head with stuff like this, as teleporting around this area is impossible the same way that it was in Vizima. It's like taking one step forward and 2 steps back, as I have to do stuff like speak to the lady and then take the boat back to the shore, run to Berengar, talk to him, run back to the shore and take the boat, and then talk to the lady, all for the promise of something later. It's exceptionally annoying, especially when I constantly run around like I need to take a fat shit because somehow running like that is faster than running with my sword sheathed. Either way, let's tear into the meat of this chapter. So the big thing is that the fish people and the townsfolk are at a tenuous state of peace, but it's not going to last at the rate that things are going. But before I can solve that issue, I need to look into this whole fucked up love triangle thing that's going on that I touched on before. So I go to talk to the bride, who's the mayor's daughter. She's looking after Alvin at the moment, so I figured that I'd check in on him as well.
It's just that I missed you. I don't like you or Triss. Can we play Kill the Elf?
Holy shit, he's gonna be a serial killer. Anyways, I'm now to go speak to the groom, who got into a fight with the bride after she said that she wanted to adopt Alvin. So I head off to the inn before bumping into this lizard person in disguise, Adam. Well, to add yet another moving part to this cavalcade of social anxiety, Adam here loves the bride-to-be, and he's currently employing Dandelion to help him win her over.
You're in love with Alina? You know she's getting married.
I love her secretly, so you must be discreet. And marriage is never an obstruction to true love.
Bye.
On top of all of this, there's somehow another monkey wrench thrown into the mix in the form of this bride's jealous sister. She claims that her sister doesn't deserve the groom and that she's now stuck with her options being close to no one. So okay, listen to this shit. The sister of the bride pulls Geralt aside and goes, "Look, I'll let you fuck me on a nearby rock right now if you give me a nicer ring than the large diamond ring that my sister got." So I give her a fucking plain silver ring and she's like, "Alright, bend me over." What the fuck is happening in this game? Was someone designated the resident smut writer at CDPR and they had a quota of holes to fill or what? Like, I've been streaming Red Dead Redemption 2 while recording this video, and I shit you not, The Witcher has skewed my expectations of women in video games so much that I was surprised when Arthur didn't get to tear down the runway of any lady that he helped out in some capacity.
You elves will never change. You ignore the obvious. A beggar, even when arrogant, remains unimpressive, even ridiculous.
So, you've come to laugh, to marvel at freaks.
Now I'm angry.
You speak of anger. I would beat you so hard you'll remember me. You.
Calm down. It'll be all right.
I don't understand how this led to sex. I guess hate fucking exists, but that was about as unnatural as a lot of the monsters that Geralt fights. So I pop into the inn finally to speak with Julian. Despite his wedding woes, I'm able to convince the guy to gift a small figurine to the Lady of the Lake that represents his willingness to come to a peace agreement with the Vadianoi. Oh yeah, that's what the fish people are called. Vadianoi. I had to wait a bit before I felt confident enough to pronounce that, and even then I'm still a little shaky on it. Also, I've come to a startling realization that the girl with the giraffe neck from the start of this area is actually a product of the people here because holy shit.
What's on your mind? Are you looking for somebody? What's on your mind?
Eventually, I power back to the village to find Alvin and give him a magic-suppressing amulet from Triss. Well, he's out exploring a ruin and seems to have summoned a ghost that likes to gamble. After losing to the ghost, I take my money back by killing it.
Dwan, look into my eyes. See your death.
Ugh, fucking Hellion. I gotta say, for as much as the story here really wants to express how much Geralt cares about Alvin and wants to see him safe, I have almost zero attachment to the boy. He's a bit of a brat and he's hyperactive to an annoying level, always saying really creepy and overly ambitious things. And there really hasn't been any time set aside to allow the player to feel a bond to the character. We're just supposed to care about him because he's a magical child that Triss wants to set straight. Anyways, so Alvin tells us about dreaming of the bride-to-be over and over. So I go to ask Julian to make sure that everything's okay with her. He says he hasn't seen his bride since she wandered off into the fields. So I run out there and it turns out that the bride has turned into a Noonwraith. Now, Noonwraiths are usually born out of sadness when a woman is killed right around, well, noon. In the third game, these spirits are expanded on a little more to include the detail that Noonwraiths are typically women who are killed just before their wedding. So what happened here was...
You killed my beloved Elena!
I didn't mean to!
Lawyer, you were jealous of her! Die, murderer!
Ah!
Yeah, the sister of the bride killed her out of jealousy. This is an okay plotline, but the execution is particularly atrocious. Like, almost comically so.
It burns!
I like the premise, but this cheesy stuff is just too much for me to overlook. So this fiasco of a wedding is effectively dead and done, as I must now report back to Julian and tell him that his bride was killed by her sister, who was then killed by Adam right after. Are you ready for some Oscar award-winning acting?
I was supposed to find Alina.
Have you?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Is she all right?
Sit down and have a drink. Alina is dead.
Dead? I see. Do what you can. I'll pay you.
Fun fact, this legendary scene which pushed The Witcher into the fame that it deserved was actually done in one take, which makes it that much more impressive. Well, Geralt's job isn't done, as simply slaying the two doesn't work here, so he asks his good pal Dandelion for a little help with the two. First, we figure out that I need to scrounge up some pieces of a mirror which the bride possessed throughout her life. Why is it shattered? I don't know. Why do I have to fight her every time for the pieces? Who cares? Just go do the busy work, and then go pay to get the mirror fixed, and then talk to this SCP anomaly disguised as a living plank of wood, and then go talk to Dandelion and have him write poetry. Yep, we've finally reached that point. I mean, I guess the whole game has kind of been this way, but the difference was that I cared a lot more about the people that I was interacting with. I don't give two dicks about the Super Slaughter Sisters and their village of cow farmers. I will say that at the very least, the game does attempt to bond you to Alvin a bit more after my initial complaining. He runs around the fields and the lakeside after you give him the necklace and insists on following you to see what being a Witcher is like. He reacts to certain things, has stuff to say about how he perceives the world, and will listen to Geralt's advice on whatever questions he has or conclusions that he draws from seeing him fight. It's not the most endearing thing, but the game is definitely trying now, so at least there's that. So eventually we meet with Dandy here in the fields at sundown, who has Geralt assist him with some poetry before the bride realizes that she's dead as hell. She wants vengeance, but due to the time of day that we did all this, her sister the Night Wraith comes floating in to show that she'd already been avenged. And that's it, really. The only other thing that we can do if we choose to do it is follow the sister who was so dummy thick that her ass cheeks phased through her dress in death, and then give her some wreath to make her clap out of existence. Then we grab the reward from Julian and that's it for the wedding. Hooray! I don't know, this quest just wasn't executed well enough for me to care about it, and it dragged on far too long with way too much busy work. Oh well. Let's get back to establishing peace between the humans and the Vadianoi. Well, I believe I accidentally skipped a large chunk of the background of this quest with the way that I went about it. I never learned what exactly the conflict between these peoples was. I just went up to Julian and I said, "Hey, give me a figurine." And then I went up to the Vadianoi priest and I said, "Hey, give me a bracelet." And then I went back to the Lady of the Lake and I received an item from her before summoning a huge Vadianoi and defeating him. Then I receive what's supposed to be a very powerful silver sword, but it's apparently bugged according to the wiki, so it doesn't do as much damage as it claims that it does. Now what was supposed to happen was that I was supposed to find out that Julian wants me to kill the huge Vadianoi, which a good chunk of the fish people worship. And the fish person priest wants me to do that also, but by luring the human village's prize cow over to the island as a sacrifice in order to lure out this huge Vadianoi. So basically all three paths have me fighting this big load of a fish monster, but for different causes more or less. The way that I did it was definitely the path of unity, as both sides worship the Lady of the Lake, and she demanded that I kill the fish giant. But had I done it for one of the other factions explicitly, there would have been more conflict between the two. Whatever, I really just want to get out of this chapter. The problem with chapter 4 is that it's such a welcoming sight and that it's a whole new setting to explore, away from the streets of Vizima and its surrounding swamp. There are rolling fields and a shore with plenty of interesting parties to talk to. And like I mentioned before, the entire chapter is a lot more fantastical than the others, with appearances of various wraiths and fish people and giant centipedes and the like. The premise is there, but the execution is so lackluster and boring that it makes me want to mash through it rather than continue to explore. It's the opposite issue of the previous two chapters, where the setting is mediocre but the characters and storytelling is generally a lot more interesting. I guess something like chapter 4 happens when you teleport Geralt away from nearly every single interesting character and instead surround him by people with the personalities of scarecrows. Well, to kick off the beginning of the end of the chapter, up strolls Berengar. He confidently now tells Geralt the entire truth, that he was the one who told Salamandra where Kaer Morhen was, that he escaped them, tried to take out the beast, got captured again, gave them more intel, escaped again, tried to help Kalkstein, got captured again, and escaped one more time. My options here are to kill him for his betrayals or to forgive him and let bygones be bygones. It's not an easy choice, because Salamandra has consistently been a source of evil in this game, and if Berengar hadn't told them where Kaer Morhen was, a lot of this may have not happened the way that it did. But Geralt's always been less judgmental if he's in a position to be. Sure, he might make the occasional sarcastic remark, but he tends to try to not get too wrapped up in other people's motivations if he can. I'd personally like to believe that he would have let Berengar go here, so I choose that option. Berengar shows his gratitude by giving Geralt his amulet and a few other helpful scrolls before moving on. The actual end of the chapter has me running into this Order of the Flaming Rose Inquisitor type person. She goes by White Rayla, and she continues to make my choice of opposing the Order easier and easier when she tells me that her and her men are going to slaughter the entire village for protecting and feeding the elves. Very cool. I mean, I guess if the elves are actively making weapons and plans to attack or whatever as a reinforcement squad, then maybe it's worth sending a battalion out here to eviscerate them, but I don't know. The Order almost makes themselves easy to hate on purpose, especially when they're willing to kill off a village for not turning a blind eye to starvation. Well, as if the elves heard that the Order is going to kill off the peasants for feeding them, it's almost as if they decided, hey, we can be equally as heinous, and have now actively taken the town who fed and protected them hostage. Although it's not like the same exact elves took the town hostage, to be fair. It was actually a group who came over from Vizima to force the kind elf who holed up here to join their fight. And now these assholes with their new armor bought with the gold that Geralt helped them steal have the audacity to demand that he help them fight too. So I'm supposed to choose between the Order, who are murderous assholes, or the Scoia'tael, who are murderous assholes, but for a different reason. Maybe Geralt has the right idea with his infamous neutrality. But man, this is a fucking tough scenario. I mean, let's lay things out. The Order are racist assholes who have a few good eggs, but not enough to make the whole crowd worth fighting for. They pretty much have caused this to happen in a way by treating non-humans the way that they have. And on the other side of that coin, the non-humans definitely deserve their rights and freedoms, but they're now at the stage where they've been blinded by seething hatred and are making just as shitty decisions as the humans, only with the facade that the humans have it coming. The biggest victims here are the peasants and the townsfolk who suffer because of both sides, and it doesn't feel great to support either. So I decide to go with neutrality after all, which means attempting to get Alvin the hell out of Dodge before cutting down every single soldier from each side here. Well, Alvin gets scared and teleports himself away, so Dandelion and Geralt grab the boat and move back out to Vizima.
Smell that?
Yeah. Smoke. Something's burning.
Heavy and stifling, like thatched roof huts.
If only there was some other indicator besides smell for smoke. Actually, I got another fun fact for you. The hit song Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple was written in the honor of this particular scene in The Witcher 1, which I thought was pretty neat. Well, here we are. Old Vizima. Surrounded by two sides who want me dead in the middle of a plague-ridden city that's under siege. Yeah, Chapter 5 is quite different in terms of tone from the rest of this game, as you get to witness firsthand the destruction these two factions have wrought upon the city. King Foltest is actually back, and is absolutely livid with the state of his city, stating that both sides will pay for turning it into a battleground. Foltest is definitely a man of action, and I enjoy his kingly demeanor. But he's also a bit arrogant in the way that he proceeds, choosing to waltz through the main battleground of the city to see what's happening for himself. Well, as he's doing so, he of course gets ambushed before being saved by the city's head mage. He then decides to retreat back to the castle, bringing Geralt with him for a chat. Turns out that Princess Ada has gone full Striga again, and he wants Geralt to again cure her curse. He recommends that you talk to the figures that he's gathered here, which includes the likes of Triss, Duet, and Velerad. Well, Triss...
You could breed horses and sheep, I'd tend the garden, cook meals. We'd sell what we grew to buy copper pots, iron rakes. We'd age with dignity. Evenings you'd play bagpipes of your own making as a remedy for my gloom.
I have a very hard time seeing Geralt do that, whether willfully or not. But yeah, she winds up telling me that someone close to Ada must have prevented the anti-curse ritual from being maintained. She also claims that Alvin could be anywhere or any when, as he has the capability of traveling through space and time. Great. Duet is actually about 10 levels less hostile than before, claiming that he wants to put past transgressions behind the two. He then fills us in that there may be a large reward for outright killing Ada instead of trying to lift the curse again, which may be the route that we go down. He also drops a truth bomb on us in the form of Ada being the byproduct of incest between Foltest and his sister. Apparently Ada was stillborn, and yet continued to grow anyways despite being dead, seemingly the result of a curse placed on Foltest for his indecencies, which is how Ada came to be a Striga. And finally, Velerad gives us one of the last pieces of the puzzle in the knowledge that someone named Ostrit was the one who supposedly cursed Ada when he found out that Foltest had relations with his sister, seeing as he loved Foltest's sister. It's worth noting that Velerad hints that Foltest loves his daughter very much, which may point towards the idea that Duet was encouraging me to kill her for his own personal benefit. Well, to clear things up, the king himself has me drop by and tells me directly that he wants the curse lifted. But if it cannot be, then I may also kill his daughter as long as I can do it cleanly. He also gives me the go-ahead to continue wiping out Salamandra, which is a given. So we return back to the hellscape of Vizima, which features Old Vizima as a new area along with a few others. Well, Old Vizima is an absolute mosh pit of non-stop fighting. I actually fought soldiers at one point for so long that the game crashed, so I guess I'm just going to avoid it if I can. When Geralt first enters this part of town, two nurses approach him and plead for him to escort them to the hospital, as both sides of the conflict are very apt to kill them for not actively fighting for their side. Or healing for their side, I guess. Geralt does so and is immediately offered a threesome for his act of heroism. Because what better time to form an Ouroboros of laying pipe than when surrounded by dying people? Well, Shani cockblocks us anyways, because she's absolutely livid with Geralt. This girl cannot stand the fact that he chose Triss to look after Alvin over her, which, yeah, it's understandable, but man, there's a time and place. Let me have my threesome. So after this run-in, there's word that Ada is tearing through people left and right, and that she's currently at a tower in the middle of town. Well, when Geralt arrives on scene, it isn't Ada, it's actually a mutant. A mutant. Whatever. Apparently, Big Man's experiments are coming along, and this is what he's whipped up. After dispatching the thing, we head back to the hospital, only for this pompous prick of a Scoia'tael to come rumbling in.
We wound them so they'll die, and you're treating them. How illogical, and contrary to our interests.
Holy shit, that was some exceptionally bad dialogue. Who talks like this? Well, we take out the Scoia'tael and Geralt tells Shani, alright, you're safe.
How can anyone fall so low?
I've seen worse in town.
Thank you, on behalf of all the patients.
They shouldn't bother you anymore. See you later.
Farewell.
Arrest and question all non-humans!
Jesus Christ, really? Man, it's rough going on this roller coaster ride sometimes. You have these high points where my intrigue is piqued by a ton of various interesting plot lines intersecting all at once. And then you have these low points where the sloppy execution of different events just kills my buzz. I guess it would help if the timing wasn't almost comedic in the way that these assholes show up one after another. Unfortunately, this trend continues throughout a lot of this chapter, and it's a crying shame because this is probably the most interesting chapter in a lot of ways. It's the beginning of the climax for a lot of key points in this game, and the jankiness is a lot harder to ignore than when things were a bit more lighthearted. Here's a great example that happens right after the two factions attack the hospital. So you escort Shani to the Swamp Cemetery, which is the other main new area of the chapter. You fight through barrier after barrier filled with monsters. Every time you kill all the monsters, Shani talks to you. If you try to loot any monster before she talks to you, the game soft locks. So you make it to the end of this maze and a cutscene plays out where Yavin shoots White Rayla, presumably killing her. It's not a, compelling scene. But you continue on through the swamp and there's just tons of monsters waiting. I take out the first wave when suddenly the Order's leader, the mage from before who saved Cultist, comes strolling in to magically eliminate some broken boxes and barrels. I guess his men also take out the rest of the monsters, but they really wouldn't have been an issue. I was actually looking forward to taking them out. But Geralt thanks Jacques here for getting here just in time. Some of the dialogue is just aggravating at this stage, and I'm going to attempt to stop mentioning it just because I'm sick of repeating it. Anyways, there's some back and forth about what the Order stands for, and this guy doesn't seem so bad. He reminds me of Siegfried in a way, and it does make me reconsider my stance on the Order as a whole again, though not enough to second-guess my neutrality. So I make my way through the Swamp Cemetery, which is packed to the brim with monsters. I go spelunking through a few caves and crypts for Raven's armor parts before making it to the church on the hill, where Ada is said to have made her home. When I head into the place, Velerad locks me in to make sure that I take care of Ada before she can escape again. This is a tough-ass fight. I actually do try to kill her, but at one point she just regains all of her health, so the only thing that I can do is hold her off until the sun rises. When it does, the curse is lifted again, and she cries to Geralt about how she was manipulated by Salamandra to do the things that she did. Alright. I just fear the thought of her being the next monarch after Cultist. Either way, Chapter 5 follows the same formula as the other chapters from here, at least for me. I fulfill some contracts, take on the world's best fist fighter, kill some trophy monsters, and run back to the hospital to fuck the nurses.
The goddess of love and fertility grant me strength.
But afterwards, we'll pray together.
What the fuck is this? There are people dying back there. Why is the game like this? It's important to note that despite going through this process over and over 5 times now, I can't help but feel compelled to try to soak up as much XP and gun for the best weapons and armor that I can, which definitely speaks for the natural intrigue that this game brings. If I were truly done and just wanted to end it, I could hyper-focus on the main questline at this stage and just get it over with. So that's very much a huge point in The Witcher's favor. Now that said, it isn't all good, obviously. This Swamp Cemetery definitely has the feel of an endgame area with the sheer amount of monsters which loom throughout it. Which is fine, but the issue is that as with the fighting in the city, I've taken to ignoring them if I can. I have no interest in fighting stupid-ass drowners which die in one hit, especially when they're littering every chunk of the map. I've even put on a ribbon which causes them to avoid me, which is great. What isn't great, however, is the fact that being near a monster causes me to be unable to enter new areas. So if a drowner is running around near me, I have to chase it down and hope that no others are near it. I have to wait to transition to any part of this map, and it sucks. Furthermore, navigation is a nightmare. Again, there's no hurdling over small branches or clearing out obstacles. So while a pathway may look open, it oftentimes isn't or has a very specific way to circumvent it. It really puts a damper on this entire expedition. It's worth noting that at this stage I am flush with cash, and I really don't have anything else to spend it on, ironically. I've gained the 2 swords that I want through questing, and I'm in the process of gaining the armor that I want. I have pretty much all the knowledge I need from books, so now I just have money. Where's my property management sim? I want to start buying up places in Vizima to furnish and flip. At any rate, I finish up my quest for armor, which looks fucking great. It changes in both looks and stats based off of which faction you side with or don't side with, which is also a neat feature. But I've always liked the neutral flavor the most. So now let's refocus on the main stuff again. After lifting Ada's curse for a second time, Velerad tells me that Cultist wanted me to head to the old manor just past the swamp cemetery. Well, here stands shit-for-brains DeWitt, who demands to know what Geralt is up to. Geralt responds by telling him that he just dealt with a Striga, and that there's a traitor in the ranks according to a diary that he found. DeWitt plays himself by asking for Ostrit's diary, despite Geralt never telling him who it belonged to. So DW drops all pretenses and asks Geralt to join him in overthrowing Temeria's leadership. Apparently the guy's been working with Salamandra the entire time as a means to an end, and well, yeah. Looks like Taller was right.
You're a worm. I won't soil my boots on a piece of crap like you.
Fuck yourself, mutant! You shall die at my sword!
That hurt.
Well, this looks to be it. There are mutants everywhere, tons of never-before-seen enemies which swarm the area. At one stage, Big Man reveals that he turned White Rayla into one also. I mean, she died in like 2 hits, but it's clear that they're getting better and better at creating new mutants. I meet with Triss and a squad of heavy hitters from Foltest's troops, and we keep kicking ass until we get to the entrance of the catacombs where Geralt goes it alone. This is something that I hadn't really mentioned in explicit detail, but the choreography of Geralt's moveset is really fun to watch. I touched on it at the beginning of the game, but it really is what keeps me wanting to fight with this combat system, and it's exceptionally well done the more that you level up. So I fight my way through this place to the labs where Big Man awaits. He winds up sending a big old mud crab at me, and then gets upset when I kill it.
This time you pissed in a tornado.
Well, we finally make it to the guy, and Berengar actually winds up joining me after thinking on it for a while, effectively redeeming himself to a degree. The fight itself is more annoying than epic. Big Man has a lot of knockdown effects, which break up my combos effectively. Though to be fair, he falls to Ard just as easily, so it becomes a bit of a slapfest in that regard. Well, the plot only thickens when Big Man falls, as the leader of the Order of the Flaming Rose starts shouting through the mirror here, claiming that he needs more mutants ASAP. So yeah, Jacques has effectively fingered himself in this whole ordeal, proving that the Order is behind Salamandra. Or was, rather. I guess me liking the guy proved to be the wrong call, and it makes me wonder what Siegfried is doing in all of this. Geralt meets with Triss immediately after, and the two boat over to Foltest's castle to warn him. This marks the end of Chapter 5 and kicks off the Epilogue. In Vizima, the Order has taken back control of the Temple Quarter, and the Grand Master of the Order is doing his best to besmirch Foltest and Geralt's names while instilling faith in his order. He's had town criers spread the word that Ada is running free as a Striga, that the hungry peasants will have as much food as they want if they come to the walls of the Order, and that Geralt must die at all costs. Of course, my game fails to load properly and I have to restart it, but beyond that, things look pretty grim. So when my game decides that it's ready to function again, we return to Geralt, Triss, Dandelion, Foltest, and Radovid. The two kings have struck a deal through all of this. Radovid provides military support and Foltest promises Ada to him. Additionally, Foltest states that he will grant Geralt 8,000 gold to slay the Grand Master of the Order, which is kinda laughable considering I think I have like 10 or 11,000 on me right now, but yeah, great, 8,000, woo! I like Foltest. The guy is a no-nonsense king who calls things as he sees them.
Stop deliberating, son. We need to put out the fire in this whorehouse.
Then bold Foltest uttered these words. Virtuous Radovid.
What the hell is that?
I'm trying to keep a faithful and accurate record of these events.
He said, stop deliberating, son. We need to put out the fire in this whorehouse.
So we tear through town before running into Siegfried, who's leading a mixed group of regular and mutant soldiers. If you choose one of the options here, Siegfried boasts that the mutants are a new breed of superhuman which must lead the way into a new era, and you wind up fighting to the death. If you choose the other option, he clears out the peasants here before continuing on to fight more elves. I guess the guy is in too deep to see the folly of his ways, which kinda makes sense. Well, the same kind of scenario happens with Yavin as you make your way through town, except that the elf actually does heed your words and listen to what you have to tell him. After blasting through the sewers and fighting this gigantic hentai monster, I finally make it back to the Grandmaster's building. Geralt decides to trick Triss into leaving by telling her that he's out of potions, and then he sneaks into the building as she leaves to get them. When Geralt makes it to Jacques, the guy is kissing babies and generally presenting himself like the savior of the people, as you might expect. But the thing is, what is this guy after? Just power? Well, no. I mean, yes, but not directly. His end goal seems to be to prevent something that he calls the White Frost. This is a cataclysmic event that Jacques describes as the end of everything. To show Geralt what he means, Jacques pulls the Witcher into a vision of the future located in his mind. In this vision, Vizima stands frozen in ice, with no life around. Geralt doesn't seem to show too much concern, writing the whole display off as parlor tricks.
Save your rhetoric for the plebs.
Well, Jacques bamps himself across the area and starts flinging his troops at Geralt as he forces his way towards the mage. This entire encounter is strange, but kind of cool. Basically, Triss comes in and says that Geralt's willpower was strong enough to summon the idea of Triss into this future, despite her not actually being here. She helps Geralt fight through here as he encounters more visions. One of Abigail, one of the sister who turned into a night wraith, and the most concerning one, the King of the Wild Hunt. Well, eventually we make it to another set of illusions which actually fight us in the form of Siegfried and Yevon. And then just beyond them, Alvin pops in for just a moment before vanishing. I'll have more to say on that in a moment. Now, throughout this entire endeavor, Jacques has stopped me to explain his reasoning and decision-making, clarifying what he wants to accomplish. Yes, he wants to be the leader of humanity to save them. He wants to lead them to band together and head south to avoid this fate somehow. I'm not sure how going south will help if all of humanity dies regardless. Unless there's just no humans in the south. Which might actually be the case, seeing as Jacques also really hates non-humans. He can't stand them, and he wants them all dead, citing their hatred for humanity despite hiding behind this mask of beauty as his reasoning. Well, we finally claw our way up to the mage, who asks Geralt to join him, and claims that because Geralt was strong enough to make it here, then he must surely see the value that a good mutant brings to the table against this frozen wasteland. He does make a point, but there are many who would die to accomplish this task, and I'd personally rather try to find an alternative. The final battle is pretty, easy. Really easy, actually. The guy goes down fast before the King of the Wild Hunt shows up again to bully the ever-living fuck out of Geralt. He's like, "Man, you are like the ultimate tool of destruction. Literally every place you went was left worse than you found it. Now hand over this guy's soul, loser. I want that shit." I actually went through both options to see how this plays out. In option 1, Geralt fights the King of the Wild Hunt for the right to release Jacques' soul. This fight's more difficult than Jacques' fight, but it's still not difficult at all. I think I'm just overpowered and have been for a while, which is weird because I'm not even close to max level. When all is said and done, Geralt walks up to the mage and gets ready to plunge his sword into his chest. Jacques flings the sword away before Geralt reaches for his silver instead.
That sword is for monsters.
I love this scene, man. It's about as perfect as you can get. In option 2, Geralt forfeits Jacques' soul to the undead king and then kills him in the same way. It's not really a wild step away from what happened in option 1, but it is worth noting that the king tells you that you knew Jacques here by another name. And that's the thing that I wanted to talk about before. Many of the things which Jacques says to Geralt are things which Geralt told Alvin when he was mentoring him. That the elves lost their beautiful veneer to murderous hatred. That Alvin's visions are a gift, one that he's using for good. Furthermore, when asking Triss about Jacques earlier on, she claims that he uses his magic wildly, like someone who started magic lessons but never fully finished them. And finally, Jacques' body contains an amulet which is made from the same magic-suppressing material which Triss gave him. So yeah, Jacques is 100% Alvin. And the little "let's play kill the elf" bastard time-traveled to become the Grand Master of the Order. Oddly enough though, this isn't ever directly confirmed in the game, but the way that Geralt hints at it has all the subtlety of a freight train. It is confirmed for sure later in The Witcher 3 though, for some reason. But yeah, this is the end of the road for this game. Dandelion plays us out, describing the aftermath of the battle in Vizima, and how it left the city devastated. Foltest actually intentionally let the two fight longer than was strictly necessary just to bleed the two factions out, which I thought was actually kinda ruthlessly cool. But eventually Dandelion's part in the play ends, and the game takes us over to one last cutscene which is rendered out in the same way that the opener is. This one unfolds in a very tame way, as Geralt is paid by Foltest for a job well done. As the Witcher happily walks out of the castle, he spots a trail of blood leading to a body before the realization strikes our boy. I mean, the scene is definitely dated, but I did kind of enjoy it at the same time, even if Geralt's face looks like it's missing eyebrows or something. As Geralt unmasks the Scooby-Doo villain, it's revealed that the would-be assassin shares the same eyes as our boy, denoting his Witcher blood. It's a pretty cool scene that sets up the second game nicely, and I like it a lot despite its aged graphics. You know, after this much script, I totally get how other YouTubers have done what they've done with these games. Like, my god. There was so much I didn't cover, that I didn't expand on, quests that I skipped or missed, people that I didn't go into extensive detail on, motivations and backgrounds which I outright ignored. This video is me trying to be concise. Can you believe that shit? But anyways, let's wrap this up. So The Witcher it's a lot. There is so much that I love about this game. There's so much that I passionately dislike. I love the people, the lore, the backgrounds, the way a lot of the characters and stories are written. I love the universe itself and all of the fun ideas which I'd never been able to invent if I tried. There are so many intertwining stories which tie into other games, which have a life of their own. Factions and sub-factions compounding and compelling the universe to move at their behest. The situations which Geralt finds himself a part of almost always conflict with his personality, which is an interesting way to write a story. You as a player may have interest in learning about various political struggles which take place behind the scenes in the noble court of Vizima. You might want to know how Redania fits into the picture and what exactly they want with Temeria beyond a union. You might wonder where Nilfgaard fits into all of this. But Geralt wants none of that. Nearly every chunk of dialogue regarding him and politics is some shade of him not caring unless he's forced to. He's not uneducated, he just feels that it isn't his place. In fact, if you think about it, the only things that he's cared about after the first 10 minutes of the game is defeating Salamandra and looking after the people that he cares about. Oh, and sex. And yet defeating this well-established criminal organization proves to be a lot more of an endeavor than simply finding and killing the leader. The hoops which he has to jump through take him through a corrupt village of peasants who claim religion as a shield, through some of the highest and most secretive backrooms in the kingdom, through an entire civil war between two extreme groups, and to the literal end of the world in a way. And yet if you asked him what he cared about, the answer probably wouldn't even include most of these things. Even when you as a player chooses a side when it comes to these pivotal moments, Geralt doesn't become a revolutionary, or one who deals in royal secrets, or a religious zealot. He remains true to himself and his own wants, unconcerned but still painfully aware of those who would use him and his power to get what they want. These are all positive points for this game, and just talking about them makes me want to go research more of these things that I as a player care about. But for all of those positives, this game has a very ugly side to it lurking just beneath the surface. There are tons of little bugs which make the game somehow slower to complete between my game crashing or something not loading properly. There are horribly executed dialogues which feel super awkward with the way that they're presented. The questing and exploration leave so much to be desired that thinking about it still upsets me to a degree despite completing a majority of the game. The biggest issue with exploration and questing is actually something I had trouble putting into words until after I beat the game. Whereas a well thought out game might have you slowly working through a small area and completing the quest there before moving to the next small area, The Witcher dumps all of its quests into the world and goes, alright, good luck. This means that if you don't have a guide which details the best quest order, you run around like a chicken with its head cut off back and forth around the map to complete one or two quests, and then you do that same thing over and over. A game with good quest design would have had me tying up quests in a single corner of the map before moving on to another, in addition to having a handful of overarching quests to run through after I got done with the exploration phase. Or at the very least, the game should gray out the quests where I need a certain trigger before they're okay to proceed with. You'll be sick of nearly every chapter's map by the time you're halfway through them, and that's just not good design. I relish the moments when two objectives happen to be right next to each other. But more often than not, I spent most of the time tracking down an NPC which had their own schedule and could be a variety of places in the hopes that they were in the place that was indicated on the map. Furthermore, some NPCs wouldn't even show up unless I completed a particular quest first, and the game does not tell you that. So if you keep stalking a place from dawn to noon to dusk to midnight, which the game tells you to meet someone at, and they're just not showing up, then there's a high chance that you have to complete a different quest first. This also extends to certain trophy monsters if you're on particular missions, in that those monsters just don't show up during those quests. Additionally, this game... Okay, I know this one's gonna be weird, but the game has far too much sex. I mean, I'm not prudish by any means, but there are times where it's very obvious that the devs had a map of sexual encounters with all the art drawn up for them, but then didn't know how to write a good way for the encounters to come up. Obviously, prostitution is an easy one, and the stuff with the main characters and things like the Queen of the Night or the general peasant women. But there are times where you do a quest for a woman, and even if they're pissed off or standoffish towards Geralt, they bang him 10 seconds later. It's just odd, and it really takes away more than it adds in my eyes. I wouldn't have even had an issue with this if there were some kind of decently well-written excuse for the lady to drop her pants, but it's extremely hit or miss depending on the scenario. The combat is something I mentioned a couple times throughout the video, but it's such a weird mixture of good and bad. It has its strengths in the actual animations. The moves which Geralt pulls off when fighting look really good, but it almost feels like it should have had more of a combo system going for it, where how I click affects my moves, rather than just simply clicking when my sword flashes. And by the end of the game, this system does get pretty boring, especially when I'm forced to clear out enemies in order to open doors to other areas. So is The Witcher as good as I remember? No, absolutely not. And I hate to phrase it that way, because what I remembered was that the game had a good story, and a not so good combat system. And that's all. And I was right about the story. I was right about the intrigue that I felt. But what my mind conveniently forgot to protect itself was the sheer tedium, the unadulterated humdrum of the quest system, and the way that these maps are laid out. There are so many mailman back and forth fetch quests. There are so many times where I needed to run from the end of one map to the end of another, and the game really only gives you a more convenient way to do this in 2 chapters max. Chapter 4 was a total bust for me in nearly every single way save for a few crumbs of intrigue, and I completely forgot how lame it was in comparison to the events of the other chapters. And like I said, I simply forgot about these things, probably because they weren't good enough to remember. So if you were someone who was interested in this series and maybe only ever played 3, I would say look up a video. Find someone who knows what the hell they're talking about, and listen to the lore and events which unfold here, because it's probably just not worth it for most people in 2021. If you can overlook a lot of the faults that I just rattled off though, there is an addictive game here, one with great charm and personality to it in its own right. Just don't expect too much. Anyways, I'm gonna go play some Gwent. Thanks for watching. You know, I said to myself about a quarter of the way through this thing, well, this isn't gonna be as long as I thought. Yeah. Well, anyways, I'm glad I can only look up from here with this series. But as for next time, I was going to hit Fallout 4's DLC, but an opportunity has arisen for me, so that one's gonna be delayed until July or so. Sorry about that. Anyways, I've got those limited time shirts from before, along with, I think there was like a beer cup, beer stein, that's what it's called, beer stein. And the drink, the pint glass, yes. I've also got a Twitch where I stream most Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. I've got a Twitter where I tweet out my new videos and sometimes other things. I've got a Discord where people can come shoot the shit in the meantime. And I've got a Patreon. And that's it. Have a good one.
Farewell, King.